Thank you to the patrons for supporting the channel.
Hey everyone, this video was written by a friend of mine. They wrote a whole script while I was working on a different video and were like, here, have it. I've included some of my own thoughts in here and edited it a little bit, but I just didn't think I could take credit for it, and I hope you enjoy.
Analog horror. A niche found footage subgenre that was suddenly everywhere. A style that was easy to replicate. VHS filters and text on black backgrounds. Born from half-remembered emergency broadcasts and documentaries. Though this genre was only founded in as early as the 2010s, something strange was already happening. After an explosion of popularity in 2021, people began saying it was dying. Why was this? Is there an originality problem when it comes to analog horror? And what makes one series original and the others a copy? Well, to better understand, we're going to need to look to the past. Not too far, just to 2017, to a series that inspired a similar found footage subgenre. We're going to need to talk about Petscop. Petscop was one of those blindsiding pieces of media that come from nowhere, assemble a story in ways no one had tried before, and leave a hole when they disappear. Petscop, similar to most analog horror series, is an online horror web series told through YouTube. It tells the story of someone named Paul, who finds and plays through a copy of the unreleased game Petscop. But Petscop isn't a real game. Petscop is fictional, and yet the story is told through an entirely believable player uploading footage of this fake game to YouTube. The believability of the series helps amplify the impact of its horror. As disturbing revelations are found in-game, there's no suspension of disbelief to protect the viewer. After all, the game looks real. I've actually covered this series previously. If you're interested in learning more about what happens in Petscop, or you don't want it spoiled out of context, check out this video. While I won't really cover its plot in this video, I may reference some minor spoilers. For now, I want to focus on Petscop's impact, its legacy. Petscop wasn't made in a void. Technically, it isn't the first series to use this fake game format. Creepypastas, the online equivalent of urban legends, beat Petscop by a decent margin. Polybius, a fictional subliminal messaging arcade game spread by urban legends in the 2000s, garnered interest with images of fake machines and gameplay. In 2007, Rogue Synapse brought the game to life with a recreated PC port and arcade machine of the game. Invisible Games, a 2007 fiction blog written by Catherine M. Valente, was most famous for writing about Kill Switch, a game that would erase itself if you died or finished the game, causing it to become lost media. And maybe most famously, Ben Drown, an ARG created by Alex Hall, which used convincing ROM hacks to tell the story of a ghost haunting a game of Majora's Mask. Other haunted games with their own gameplay and screenshots would soon overtake the creepypasta genre following its popularity, but original, non-existent games were some of the earliest entries in the creepypasta genre. The haunted game genre was learning. But not all of these old series hold up to time. Some rely heavily on the use of shock imagery or jump scares that were not always executed well, and so, over time, people moved away from creepypastas. And then Petscop came out in 2017. Petscop took a lot of inspiration from creepypastas and urban legends, and it starts off much the same way as them. Person finds a weird game, records footage, uploads it online. They hear about a glitch they can use to unlock hidden gameplay, dark themes are present in the footage, and a once happy children's game turns disturbing. However, Petscop has an edge over early creepypastas. It uses horror in a subtle, tension-growing way, rather than relying on more blatant ways to elicit scares. Not to mention the completely bewildering and oddly poignant story. A lot of people were enamored by this approach to telling horror stories. The level of effort put into the series to convince viewers it was real was impressive, and no one knew who was behind it while it was running, adding to the realism. Petscop's videos attracted millions of viewers, and when the series ended, people were left desperate for something to fill its void.
Uh-oh. Bye-bye.
So the TGIF genre was created, and no, it doesn't stand for Thank God It's Friday. The game I found, some of the first words uttered by Paul in the first episode of Petscop, capture the spirit of this genre, some of the more famous ones being Catastrophe Crow, Diminish, Illusion Lock, and some less well-known early entries like Dark Castle, Mr. Maker, Beta 95, and then direct parodies like Petscop 2777 and Sheriff Domestic. TGIFs had a premise that was pretty easy to understand. It had to be footage of a fake game, typically with a narrator, uploaded to an online video website like YouTube. Some had ARG elements, others leaned more into telling an interesting story with minimal audience interaction. However, despite Petscop's success, you might not even be familiar with the TGIF subgenre of web horror, and there's lots more series I haven't even mentioned. So why isn't it more popular? Why aren't there more series like Petscop? Well, after Petscop ended, it left some seriously big shoes to fill. I mean, have you seen the Guardian's feet? Since Petscop was so fresh in everyone's mind, and the community really wanted there to be more Petscop, it was inevitable any entry into the TGIF community would be compared against Petscop, mostly to its detriment. And it's true, a lot of these series took heavy inspiration from Petscop, but they were expected to be as original and polished right out the gate. The community wanted a challenge to unravel, something that built a slow burn of dread but wasn't just confusing, something realistic looking unique that wasn't chock full of Unity assets. It had to feel similar to Petscop in some ways and yet different in other ways, neither of which were well defined. And for a fresh community, fans weren't willing to wait for the years of development a well-executed story might demand. While Tony, the creator of Petscop, had been developing the story of the series for many years before it ever saw the light of day. So in this early stage, there were a lot of just alright attempts to bridge the gap in content. With a highly critical fan base, this created some conflict. Game creators began to parody each other's works, or the perceived reductive nature of the medium, some in a lighthearted way, others more mean-spirited. There was a consensus that nothing would ever be as good as Petscop. It was a one-time deal. Everything else was just copying it, a poor substitute, or a good attempt. I'd like to return to this idea of copying a series. Is it possible to start off with a copy of a piece of media and end up with something inventive? Can we use the exact same premise and format and take away a completely different message? Well, there's two series that spawned out of the TGIF trend that I think fit this bill, and interestingly, they both start off as parodies of Petscop. Let me first introduce you to Sheriff Domestic. Sheriff Domestic started as a fairly straightforward parody of Petscop. It started in October of 2019, and the description reads, "This is the one game I found in my dumpster a long time ago. This is here to show what's inside this rare game." This channel isn't taking itself seriously off the bat, and begins as basically just a parodied version of events that we see in Petscop. I'll run through the videos, but I'd recommend you watch the Sheriff Domestic videos yourself, and if you care about spoilers for the original Petscop, probably watch the original Petscop or my video about it. Information about Sheriff Domestic was first revealed in a Reddit post by user Bruh Leskowitz, a parodied version of Paul Leskowitz, the Reddit user who initially posted about Petscop. The title of the post reads, "Videos of a mysterious unfinished PSX game from 1997 called Sheriff Domestic. There's something hiding in it," with a link to the channel in that post. So what was hiding within this game? Let's find out together. But first, I need to take out my trash. Just like Petscop before it, Sheriff Domestic starts with the PlayStation 1 booting up. The developer splash screen reveals that the game was created by Dave Mention, before taking us to what might be the most badass title screen in the entire TGIF genre. Sheriff Domestic. The game begins with our character driving down the road, the rearview mirror revealing that the driver looks oddly familiar. The opening exposition, fonted in Comic Sans, reveals the premise of this game. You're driving to your first day of work, your job being to catch criminals, which I guess are crying criminals. Prompted to select a name from a bizarre list with such examples being lettuce, idiot loser, toilet, and daddy cool, the player fails to select the far more average name of Bob and is instead stuck with the name Dickhead, which I'll be shortening to DH for the most part in an attempt to not get struck down by YouTube. Taken to the overworld, we see this crude art style continue, revealing the character to be a poorly drawn copy of the Guardian from Petscop. And this really reveals what this series will be in the beginning, and in many ways continues to be. A goofy parody of Petscop following similar plot beats, concepts, and visuals, but with intentionally crude and goofy execution. It's important to note though that there is clearly a lot of skill and effort behind these videos. The aesthetics of crudeness are betrayed by the clear effort and skill needed to put this whole thing together and accurately replicate the PlayStation 1 style. And the music just bops. The wacky sense of humor this series will have is almost immediately revealed. After a phone sends DH on his mission to catch the criminals, we see a sign give the helpful pro tip of, you can move with the controller. Also, you can walk as well. And then there's the collectible discs. The Petscop parallels continue as DH arrests a criminal by completing a simple movement puzzle, mirroring the catching of pets in Petscop. For Sheriff Domestic, this also includes a screen which shows the caught criminals in cages. After sneaking past the tedium of disc collection, the player enters a room in which a series of button inputs can be seen flashing on screen briefly. The player moves to the pause screen and cuts away for a moment before entering a different room, which holds on a dark, stilted angle of this room, no player in sight. So, despite its spoofy nature, it seems that this series is also trying its hand at having a bit of a spooky side. My assumption is that the cutaway before this room was the player entering the series of button inputs which activated the strange room, similar to how Paul uses a series of button presses to enter the New Maker plane in the first Petscop. These comparisons to Petscop may be a bit tedious, so I'll try to keep it limited, but the series at this point is very clearly closely following the narrative of the project it's parodying. The description of the next video reads, after the game crashing around 5 times in this one bird room, I've found something weird. This weird, silly, stilted writing style is a through line in this series, from the descriptions to the loading screens. For instance, this video starts with a loading screen which includes the pro tip, don't forget to eat breakfast tomatoes. Coming back to the idea of inputting codes with the controller, the player moves around in an odd pattern, which seems to allow them to enter a new door, which has one of the best loading screens in the entire game. I am out of here. Now we're in somewhere a lot darker, similar to the New Maker plane of Petscop. Exploring this strange world to its very edge, DH ends up falling into a pit. The next video loads into a scene of DH seemingly dancing around, similar to one of the best episodes of Petscop 21. Most importantly though, this introduces retract mode, which seems to be a reference to the demo feature in Petscop, where inputs of a player are recorded and then could be played over different versions of levels to access new areas. I bring this up especially because it's really interesting to see Sheriff Domestic use visual parallels to an established concept in Petscop as a shorthand to let an audience familiar with Petscop sort of understand what's going on right off the bat. DH enters what appears to be a buggy or unfinished room, with a pink door locked behind the condition of collecting 60 discs. That may take some time. Cutting back to our non-retract mode gameplay, DH arises from the pit, now as a ghost, which allows him to no-clip into a building, which ends the episode. The description of this video foreshadows what's next. I don't think cheats would work with this. The opening appears to show a cheat menu before the game boots in a clearly altered and perhaps broken state. When the game loads, welcome to hell, cheater. Uh-oh, Sheriff Domestic has an anti-cheat. The player is now on the clock to beat Minesweeper. Dear God. Time skips imply that the player is stuck here for a long time, but when DH finally does find success, something appears that has been censored for us viewers, another concept borrowed from Petscop, and some text pops up. Congratulations! You've wasted your time. It seems beating this game was just a dangling carrot. Sheriff Domestic has no sympathy for cheaters. This episode really starts to mark a shift in the series. Before this, things seemed like a pretty straightforward parody of concepts and events in Petscop, albeit with some creative execution. But this anti-cheat concept in Minesweeper gameplay, this is new. This is a unique idea, executed in a really creative way. This parody is starting to become a vehicle for new ideas. The description for the next entry hints at things we may see in the future. future. So, this is the one game I found in my dumpster long ago. This channel is here to show what's inside of this cursed game. I don't know what I'm actually seeing, but it's something I should keep looking. I'm planning to get a microphone so I can share some thoughts about what's happening in the future. Not sure when it would arrive though. Unlike Petscop, the player of this game has yet to provide any commentary up to this point, but it appears they're planning on doing so in the future. We pick up where we left off. It seems that the game has sat in this anti-cheat room for a while, when suddenly DH explodes. The game seems to get stuck in a boot cycle loop for a few days until finally booting correctly. Unfortunately, it seems the save files have all been deleted. We get some footage back in retract mode, which shows the inputs of the first episode, but played over a version of the world without the discs. Cutting out of retract mode, the player finds a sign simply reading Dave's City, where they are then loaded into Dave's City. This place is a huge change of pace from what we've seen in this series and in Petscop. A noir cityscape boosting ramps, creepy figures, including one that appears to be a crudely drawn version of Care from Petscop, and some bangin' music. DH is thrown off a ramp leading to a new area, a top-down cityscape, dodging high-speed traffic. Deftly navigating the hazardous environment, the player finds and is then confronted with some strange character, when suddenly,
listen to me. I'm the gun speaking. You'll have to shoot him. Nice. I am the gun. I shoot bullet.
with DH thoroughly strapped, so ends episode 5. The description of episode 6 seems to imply that the uploader is getting irritated by the game. The captions tell us that the first shot of this video seems to be a continuation of the last shot in the first video, and this time we see something. A dark figure wanders onto the screen, but quickly seems to notice it's being watched. When we move back to the standard game, we can hear a barely audible, incredibly compressed voice. It appears the uploader finally got a mic.
Like, yeah, do like a new experiment today.
The mysterious figure also appears in the background, disappearing into the tunnel. He tells us he's collected all the discs and should be able to get access to the pink door now, but the locked message still remains, causing a bit of a gamer freakout! Episode 7 picks up exactly where we left off in episode 6, and, well, I think it's the best episode, so here, just watch the whole thing.
Oh no!
The boot screen in the opening of the next episode is revealed to actually be an object in-game, and we're in some sort of bedroom, as dialogue plays out between two unseen characters, another storytelling technique lifted from Petscop, usually indicating that the dialogue is actually from two people in the real world that was overheard and put into the game by the developer. So chances are this was a real-life conversation between two people at some point. It essentially plays out as someone telling Dave to stop brushing his teeth with that, and that it's not a toy, with Dave rebutting, "It's my best friend," especially with the emphasis later, "This thing seems to be a gun." It ends on a slightly more ominous note.
You can't stop me!
This comes to a screeching halt as a software termination screen appears. The screen seems to be in some way a reference to the Ghost Room Keep Console Running image in Petscop, but also a reference to Spyro Year of the Dragon's anti-piracy message. The pure absurdity of the game is even starting to get to the uploader, as the description of the next video reads, "Game from the dumpster. Channel shows what's inside the game." What the hell is happening? The player, still inside the room from the last video, phases through the ground, where we see a loading screen that references the Stanley Parable, into a new bedroom, with access to a computer and game console. The computer seems to show the website for Sheriff Domestic, but like most text in Sheriff Domestic, it's mostly nonsensical rambling.
It's been an honor still existing, making video games to just get those dollars, just to make discs and discs and discs, copies, 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 money, money, money. We are good at that. Buy our game.
The game console allows DH to play Operation Steel Disc 5, which appears to be an incredibly broken, hastily made top-down game, which really just spells out a simple message: fuck. After exiting the game, a strange orb-like cursor begins floating about, before seeming to find the right spot, which boots us back into Dave's City. From here, DH is launched from a ramp into a billboard, and the game seems to reset. Now we're back in the car, in the name select screen. Unwilling to choose any of the goofier names, the player spams the unavailable name Bob until suddenly, The description of the next video pulls another narrative parallel to Petscop. Hello, we, the group, is now here to take over the investigation of this game. This seems to imply that not all of the gameplay from here on will be from the same person, and some outside force has taken control of the channel. After a moment in retract mode showing DH using some kind of assumedly dev tool to no-clip around, we cut back to the character select screen, where Bob has completely been removed as an option. The player chooses Pickle Chin, which loads us into an entirely different opening, this time calling on Pickle Chin to help because Dave still has the gun. The opening plays out very similarly to an old Super Mario hack, Super Mario Movie. Pickle Chin loads into a sort of glitched version of the main overworld, but entering into a door leads us to almost an entirely new game. Pickle Chin is now in first person, avoiding traps and solving puzzles in a dungeon, one of these puzzles which seems to show a photograph of a gun with googly eyes on top of a PS1. I guess this was Dave's best friend? In the bottom right, there's 3 empty disc slots. Navigating past deadly saws and falling boulders, Pickle Chin comes across a cracked blue disc with a face, who assures the player it's not the real blue disc that you're looking for. This disc's name is Song, and clarifies that Pickle Chin's goal at the moment is to collect 3 discs. Song joins Pickle Chin as a companion, and we end this video with one final challenge to Pickle Chin. Do rap.
Gun, bullet. No, bullet, gun. Yeah, gun, bullet. Bullet in gun. Yeah, gun, yeah. Gun, bullet, bullet. Gun. Bullet in the gun. Gun in the bullet. Bullet.
The next video continues with this group apparently restoring recordings of the game that Ed found in the dumpster. So the original uploader and player is Ed, which we'll also see later in this video. Continuing to explore this dungeon in search of the 3 discs, Pickle Chin and Song pass through a shop adorned with countless buy signs, and end up in a confrontation with a boss fight, first needing to enter their actual real name, Ed. The intense scuffle of kicks and singing ends with Pickle Chin and Song successfully defeating the speaker and collecting the blue disc. Exiting back through the shop, the lights are out, and when Song offers Pickle Chin some food that they stole from the store, the shopkeep teleports behind them and seems to send them to a room of more puzzles, a path memorization game that may keep Pickle Chin for a while. So we cut back to DH back in the bedroom, when suddenly the gun is bored, now anthropomorphized like we saw in earlier depictions. Unable to properly entertain the gun, it gets angry and blasts a hole through the door, allowing DH to escape. The description of the next video is odd. The save files, this is their fault. We find Pickle Chin back at the memorization puzzle. Who knows how long he's been there. After what appears to be countless attempts, Song remembers that they can just fly over the door. Pickle Chin enters a room full of numbered doors, and entering one, finds DH in the aftermath of a failed attempt at beating the Minesweeper cheater room from a few videos ago. Our player exits out and looks at the saves. It seems that these doors correspond to game saves or save states. Loading into a save file marked loser, we see a character reminiscent of Belle from Petscop locked in a cage. Then we cut back to DH in retract mode gameplay, sliding around with this no clipping tool, stumbling upon a room of misplaced textures before the game freaks out and seems to corrupt the save. Re-entering this save file, there's a cutscene of a red car dropping DH back off at the house that they were in. DH tries to leave through the door where he finds someone, presumably Dave, brushing their teeth with a gun and arrests them. There's an unsettling cutscene of this arrest, and then the game seems to corrupt again. The next episode was uploaded on April 1st and is mostly just 20 straight minutes of a toilet. At one point, the retract mode indicator blinks SOS, but that's about it. The description of this next video warns us there were reports of people being cursed by simply watch this specific video. We boot into what seems to be an even more crudely constructed game, also made by Dave Mention, some sort of prototype or older version of Sheriff Domestic, the Awoglet How. Now taking place in a jungle, swinging on vines like Pitfall, our triumphant Awoglet stumbles across a fire in the jungle. Faced with a choice of 2 buckets, the Awoglet seems to have chosen the wrong one as the jungle erupts in flames. Escaping to the safety of a spaceship, this refuge is only temporary as the ship crashes into the moon. We are then treated to many minutes of aimless wandering on the moon's barren surface as the Earth is engulfed in flames in the background. Eventually, Awoglet stumbles across a golden disc, the apparent goal of the game, but in order to win it, must defeat Solry? The battle rages on, and Awuglit defeats Solry handily. The disc is get. We get a game win screen that features an incomprehensibly compressed rendition of You Spin Me Round with a cute little Awuglit spinning. The game loads to a thank you screen reading, "Thank you for play the Awuglit's How. Keep an eye out for our next game, Sheriff Domestic. Dave Mention Studios, Boston." However, when brightening the image, now we're in familiar territory. We get some extra text, which will never see the light of day as long as I breathe. We also see a crudely drawn Freddy Fazbear, which, for those who don't know, is further reference to the fact that this was Scott Cawthon, the developer of Five Nights at Freddy's, go-to technique for hiding secrets in the lead up to a game's release, hiding text and screenshots that would be revealed when brightening an image. So Awuglit How was the precursor to Sheriff Domestic, and it seems that the Awuglit character was the beta DH, and Solry was the beta Picklechin. The text hidden in the thank you screen seems to imply that Sheriff Domestic was never intended to be released, which would explain why it was found in a dumpster. In addition to this Awuglit How video, we can also find an Awuglit How documentation channel, and through that, an Awuglit How website. The channel contains a tool-assisted speedrun of Awuglit How, and the channel's about page links to the Awuglit How documentation website. This website explains the backstory of Awuglit How. Initially released in the US to widespread acclaim, it also received Japanese localization. The website contains a ton of images of box art, music, screenshots of gameplay and levels unseen in the main video, images of what appears to be a Japanese video game review magazine, which seem to give the game glowingly positive reviews, aside from the fact that the game is far from finished. In the scary story section, there's a creepypasta based around the game. Let's give it a read. Welcome back to the Creepypasta Files. Today, we're gonna be reading the Awuglit How 666 Creepypasta. The following story has been told by a friend. Please keep in mind that this might be real. I used to be a big fan of the game The Awuglit How 6, but not after this experience. One day, I was walking around in my neighborhood after school, on my best day ever, because I got an A++++ on my spelling test. But in the corner of my eye, I saw a garage sale. After running over there, I saw is a box of games sitting on top of the desk an old man was sitting at. I asked him how much for the games, and he said it's free because his son doesn't want it anymore. I took the box of games, and the old man said, "Have a good day, bye." When I got back home, I searched through the box and found the popular game everyone's talking about at my school, named the Awuglit How 6. I walked to the PlayStation and booted it up. The normal Dave Mention startup played, but for a split second it said Dead Mention. I thought it was a glitch, so I kept playing. I pressed start when I got to the title, and before I pressed start, it said the Awuglit How 666 on the title instead of the Awuglit How. I was scared and almost cried. I kept playing and got to the part where you pick up the cups to put out the fire in the jungle. I picked up the cup that didn't have letters on it, but then the player glitched to the one that said gas on it, and everything set on fire. A text box popped up that said, "You will never escape. Welcome to hell." I grabbed my sledgehammer and I started smashing the disc, but it wouldn't get destroyed. I tried everything, even burning it and shredding it, but it stayed intact the whole time. I got tired from it, so I went to sleep. I woke up at 3 a.m. and my phone was ringing. I picked up and said, "Hello?" And I heard a satanic voice saying, "You will go to hell. I am the Awuglit from that game you can't destroy." A portal opened in my floor, and I started getting sucked in, and now I am in jail in hell. As I typed my final words before being tortured, I beg to you, do not find this copy of the game and play it, because you will go to hell next. Oh no, I can hear the devil now coming. I have to go. Goodbye forever. What do you think? Do you think that this game may be satanic? The game every children loves. The next video is Operation Steel Disc 5, and the description lets us know that this is also a separate game from Sheriff Domestic. Maybe another related or precursor game, considering all the focus on being collecting these discs. The description also informs us that Ed has begun acting up against the group, cutting out or hiding things from the videos. And now he's straight up disappeared, but the group is trying their best to upload what they have. Operation Steel Disc 5 plays similar to the version we saw before, including the fact that it's incredibly broken. You You play as DH, wandering the halls looking to steal a disc, with the phone from the beginning of Sheriff Domestic by your side. Some letters in the game spell out the word Dave. DH finds his way into a room with Song, the blue disc. Surprised by the sudden appearance of these individuals, the phone hatches a sinister plan with DH. They're going to steal the blue disc and make tons of money. Pretending to just be lost, DH and the phone seem to acquire Song or convince Song to come with them, and they escape by way of a first-person maze, a precursor to the first-person areas of Sheriff Domestic, but also probably a reference to the game 3D Monster Maze, considered to be one of the first horror games ever made. It ends with a fiery image of DH, Song, and a winged phone. Back to our regularly scheduled Sheriff Domestic, we find Picklechin and Song back in the failed Minesweeper room, as the ground collapses beneath them. Now caged, Song must find a way to help them escape. Song navigates through vent shafts and crypts, puzzles, and battle after battle with floppy disks, Song's expert use of music keeping them at bay. Eventually, they stumble across a room full of other living disks. After talking to them, the yellow one agrees to help and follows them back, where they free Picklechin from the cage. Oddly enough, the other flying disks seem to already be acquainted with Picklechin. The next video appears to show Sheriff Domestic in an early build, completing some puzzles in an unfinished opening area of the game. There's not much to do here except see a series of progress images of Song's sprite creation. The character falls off a ledge and the game glitches out, repeating, "Congratulations." Picklechin and Song now freed, they enter a new area, a loading screen showing the words, "A cheeseburger for eating? Eat it." This image is a strong visual parallel to the COTN incident, a video discussing a fictional TV broadcast anomaly made by the creator of Smile Guide. Picklechin and Song find themselves in a burger joint, with the green disc as the mascot. The owner agrees to let them have the disc on one condition. Picklechin gets to work with his hardest challenge yet. Finishing the burger, Picklechin delivers it to Quad. Back in the kitchen, Picklechin is interrupted by the phone, who disappears just as quickly as it appeared. Tasked with making a pizza, Picklechin...
Good job.
Oh, that was fast. Back in the dining area, we also get a glimpse of the mysteriously mic'd up character from a little while ago, who, judging by his head, I'll call Lettuce.
Thank you, kind sir.
Love that guy. Picklechin's next task is delivering this pizza, and he's thrown into a first-person vehicle sequence, reminiscent of Desert Bus, a minigame in an unreleased Penn & Teller game where the player drives from Tucson to Las Vegas at 45 miles per hour, taking a real-life 8 hours of continuous gameplay. Side note, I played what I believe is a Gmod version of this during lockdown in 2020 and went genuinely insane. The game boots back to the menu suddenly, now with the words, "Please stop playing this game." Even the game itself was getting bored by that drive. We come back to DH in the computer room. Once again venturing through the house where he earlier arrested Dave, he finds a closet of unlockable skins, but some of the necessary assets for them seem to be missing from the game. Moving downstairs, DH finds a darkened and unsettling room, with a computer displaying the road from the opening area of the game, which loads DH into that very place. Here, DH completes a few more puzzles to make a few more arrests, but DH isn't left alone for too long. The gun is once again asking for attention. Now coming back to Picklechin and Song, the uploader annotates this gameplay in the beginning, noting that there was some minor differences between the playthrough of this section that we're seeing and the first time they played it, in which the recording was corrupted and lost. We find Picklechin and Song finishing their work at the burger joint, gaining the green disc, and moving to what seems to be the location of the final red disc. Here, they find an unsettling game disc factory, endless production of identical gray game discs in a dark and cold workshop. Exploring an endless field of discs, they come across a green disc creature that's kind of like Song, who hurries them aboard a UFO. Scrolling text gives us a few more clues as to the reason for collecting these discs. Why do these discs carry such power? Nobody really knows what they do exactly, but the legend claims that those discs are required to be free from the chaos of the Possessed One. The time is almost up as the Possessed One is looking for all 3 discs. Picklechin, Song, and the green disc find themselves in another part of this uncanny factory, seeing rows and rows of disc creatures working monotonously. Song says it feels corrupted, and wonders aloud if the worker discs here are really happy about what they're doing, but an image of a microphone suddenly flashes on screen, and Song wonders if they should be saying this stuff laugh out loud. Through a door, they find the red disc. Grabbing it, the factory begins to shake and fall apart, and the green disc just barely saves Picklechin and Song with the UFO. The ship crashes in a much more tranquil and inviting area, a garden. We also get to meet some more of Song's friends, more discs, and a raining cloud tending to the garden. Inside a spare room, a computer, unusable without a keyboard, sits amid drawings that appear to be trying to find a way to get the computer to work and a possible escape plan for the discs. Also sitting in here is a whale-like plush, which I haven't mentioned up to this point, but has appeared and mysteriously disappeared in the background of a couple videos so far. In the next room, we see all 3 discs set in place. The end is near. Almost a year passes, and in the next episode, we see why. Back to DH's perspective, DH hops in a car and finds himself in a place called the Present Flats, pedestals displaying seemingly random items, except of course for the gun. A nearby door reads, "You must wait 8,766 hours. So, they did just that. Cutting forward a year, the door opens and DH finds himself in a dark void, signs leading him. Congratulations, there is more to this. You've got to taste the wine. The game suddenly freezes, and some unfinished version of maybe Operation Steel Disc plays in the corner before the video ends completely. Coming back from another pretty long break, these last 2 videos are pretty recent. Songagachi showcases something not found in the dumpster, but apparently recovered by the group some other way. A rare Tamagotchi bootleg featuring Song, something Dave mentioned was working on to increase brand awareness of the Awuglet/Steel Disc/Sheriff Domestic brand. We see a quick showcase of the features run through an emulator, although they don't all work. It's pretty cute. The end of the video suddenly cuts back to the caged loser file from quite a few episodes ago in retract mode. A door slowly opens behind it, and so ends this episode. The most recent episode is another April 1st entry, featuring the toilet again. The description tells us this is some of the recovered corrupted footage. This time, a new character hops out the toilet, who we'll call Toilet. It wanders the dark plane for a while before footage bugs out, glitching back to the "a burger for eating" screen, and then back to the save screen, where we hear someone fiddling with the mic. And the video ends. And that's Sheriff Domestic. Let's talk about it. First off, Sheriff Domestic nails the same kind of early console game feeling as Petscop, though of course it isn't trying to be 100% believable. The puzzle sections in the crypts remind me of early PS1 games like the Kingsfield series, Shadow Tower, Spyro, and Resident Evil. Song is also probably a reference to Navi from Ocarina of Time, and Song's battle fight scenes contain attacks that rely on a mechanic similar to the game's Ocarina playing mechanic. There's some more direct references as well, like the Super Mario Maker hack, Spyro's Year of the Dragon anti-cheat, a 3D monster maze, and of course it's hard to mention the real-time combat without thinking of the Final Fantasy series and other influential RPGs like Chrono Trigger. And there's tons more too, some I mentioned directly in the breakdown and some I'm sure I've missed. There's a lot of charm to the original characters in Sheriff Domestic too. Song, Wave, and the other disc characters feel like organic elements of an old PS1 game, and the dialogue, while mostly silly, still has genuine charm. It feels more than just a parody. And this series also isn't afraid to mix up its format, swapping from sinister 3D landscapes to silly 3D cutscenes, then next to first-person puzzle solving or 2D glitched parodies of itself. Due to the nature of Sheriff Domestic source material Petscop and the general absurdity of the series, it's a little difficult to glean a plot from these videos, but one is definitely there. Being upfront though, this series is still definitely an absurdist comedy, so in some ways this analysis is more just for the fun of doing it than a definitive true lore explanation, which is true of most of my analysis of these things, but especially true of something as silly as Sheriff Domestic. All of that said, there are definitely characters and events, however silly, going on here, and as the series went on, there's some themes I'm picking up that are, dare I say it, a little more serious than a simple parody of Petscop. So let's just hop in and try and get a sense for what's going on. The original channel owner finds Sheriff Domestic in a dumpster and decides to record the footage and upload it to YouTube. We find out that a person named Ed is likely the one uploading these videos. Sheriff Domestic was created by Dave Mention for the PlayStation 1 and was made in 1997 according to the original Reddit post. Ed investigates the dumpster game and starts finding oddities in its programming. The in-game plot follows DH, who is on a mission to arrest criminals under the orders of the phone. DH comes across a gun that demands sacrifices on the other other end of its bullets. Within the game, there's a character called Dave that brushes their teeth with a gun and must be arrested as a part of the game's mission. We see that there may be an element of multiplayer in the game due to other characters showing up, some of which actually use a mic, like Lettuce. Midway through investigating the game, an outside group intervenes in Ed's progress and takes over the channel. At this point, Picklechin is summoned from within the game and is given the goal to stop Dave and the gun. Picklechin meets up with a flying disc named Song, who helps him on his journey. Picklechin must collect 3 colored discs to escape. DH successfully arrests Dave and their gun. It's also unclear if DH arrested Dave, that this completed Picklechin's main mission, or if there's other Daves to still arrest. We discover that the Awuglet How and Operation Steel Disc 5 are likely earlier versions of Sheriff Domestic. For some reason, one of the creators, or the singular creator, of the Awuglet How 6 planned to never allow Sheriff Domestic to be released. The phone is revealed to be evil in some way and desires to steal discs for itself. Maybe it's the possessed one or in cahoots with it. Ed begins working against the interests of the group, implying an antagonistic relationship. Picklechin's mission shifts from taking down Dave and the gun to finding the discs and freeing the world from the chaos of the possessed one, who is apparently looking for the 3 colored discs. Once Picklechin collects all of them, we're kind of left to wonder what the next step will be at this point. That's where we're at least on a surface level, but that still leaves quite a few questions. I'm gonna try and answer some of these questions with 2 different theories. I'll call one the Dave theory and the other the corruption theory. Just as a forewarning, I think we're still missing a lot of pieces to come up with a decisive read on the series, and like I said, a bunch of this might turn out to just be nonsense, but hey, I'll try anyway just for the fun of it. Let's start with the Dave theory. In the Dave theory, Dave is still the main antagonist of Sheriff Domestic. DH acts as some type of in-game representation of Dave and causes chaos within the in-game world. The Dave in the game may also be the leading developer of Sheriff Domestic, but another dev on the team develops a rivalry with Dave, perhaps due to a lack of recognition despite the Awuglet's reception, or due to some monetary conflict over the success of the game. Perhaps the Dave in the game is some silly, kid-friendly version of Dave created by this rival, intended to showcase Dave's instability. So obviously Sheriff Domestic is a parody series, and the brushing teeth with a gun parts aren't likely to be intended to be taken seriously, so let's assume they're the other developer's way of mocking Dave. The second developer hijacks development of Sheriff Domestic and secretly places the Picklechin gameplay in order to turn Dave's original protagonist into a demonic entity, motivated only by game disc sales. Maybe the references to the phone stealing game discs then refers to the other developers feeling that their game ideas were stolen and sold without being fairly compensated. Song referencing corruption going on in Sheriff Domestic 18 then might also hint at Dave's corruption, turning into a dickhead due to power and greed. In the corruption theory, Dave is no longer the main antagonist. Sheriff Domestic was intended to be a fairly straightforward game about arresting criminals, but as a result of the game sitting for so long in a dumpster, something in the codebase changes. Out of the corrupted memory, Picklechin is spawned. Maybe they were already intended to be a playable character, but their plotline has now changed. The main antagonist in this series is now the phone, and the possessed one in Sheriff Domestic 18 now refers to DH, who is being controlled by the phone. The freedom that the disc characters pursue through Picklechin's journey is freedom from being stuck in the linear plot of the game. Perhaps the characters in some sense realize they're a part of a dead, unreleased world and seek some way to escape their railroaded fate. The imagery we see of countless yellow discs tirelessly at work in the factory, with Song questioning if they're happy with their work, may be a commentary about the game dev's happiness, or about the characters being stuck performing tasks that will never be recognized. The phone's desire to make money and steal discs may be a way of the game communicating its nihilistic view on its purpose, to make money. The group may also be the same as whoever's behind the phone. Maybe they're forcing Ed to edit and record footage to highlight the game in a positive light, cloaking the real meaning behind the footage. And again, I know this is just a parody series, but I get the sense that Sheriff Domestic is moving to tell a more serious story in its latest episode, so I'll also take a shot at looking for some deeper meaning in this series. With the game's commentary on making money and the characters' concerns about corruption, the story could seek to highlight some of the dilemmas game devs might have when it comes to sacrificing artistic merit in the pursuit of money. Whether willingly making this decision or being forced to by a larger studio, the image of the mic that flashes in between Song's queries in Sheriff Domestic 18 may highlight the idea of being listened to, that the game's desire to express itself in a more genuine way is being suppressed by a corrupt higher power. The mass production of game discs reminds me of the underpaid devs who create shovelware games en masse. There's little room for them to be creative. They're just forced to mass-produce knockoff games to appeal to a wider audience via hitching recognition from the names of larger series. In some way, Sheriff Domestic being a parody of Petscop may tie into that theme. It started as a Petscop parody, but quickly gained its own flavor and style of storytelling. I also see more of these themes of the idea of the game becoming self-aware, or at least being aware of its own corruption as it sits unplayed over the years. What happens to the characters in a story that is never read? What happens to the unread bytes on an old game disc? Picklechin's Inception is a reference to the 2005 art piece Super Mario Movie by Cory Arcangel and Paper Rad, which also plays with this idea of a game being self-aware of its own deterioration. Sheriff Domestic may be a play on this idea too, a world that is aware that it's a parody of another series, and one that is slowly breaking down as the characters seek to flee that world. So that's what I have so far for Sheriff Domestic. I think it's a great series, incredibly funny, and I love the passion, effort, and humor that is put into each episode. It really feels like a genuine old game with its own heart, and I eagerly look forward to its next uploads. If you like what I covered here, please go subscribe to the Sheriff Domestic channel so that you can keep posted on when it uploads next. And let me know if you have any thoughts on the series yourself. I'm sure I missed some pieces and that I've made some mistakes in my analysis, so I always love to hear what you have to say in the comments. With that said, I still have another series I want to show you that also starts off as a Petscop parody. That series is called AI Builds, and rather than artificial intelligence, the AI actually stands for Animal Investigator. I also want to give a bit of forewarning. AI Builds includes some intense themes, which I'll throw up here, and I don't mean this series will just be glossing over them. AI Builds may be one of the most intense series I've ever covered on my channel, and if you aren't prepared to explore these subjects right now, I recommend skipping ahead to here. With that said, let's talk about AI Builds. The first reference to Animal Investigator was about 4 years ago in a Reddit post to the Petscop subreddit by NP Mansfield. The post states, "I don't remember ever buying this game. Should I play it? Let me know," with the following image. The image states that the game is made by Fresh Zone, rated E for everyone, and some text notes, "Kids are calling it fun, fun, fun. They're really playing it." The Reddit poster also replies to a few comments. One Redditor, Lena Leskowitz, asks a few questions. When was the game made? It says 1999. What console is it for? It's for PC. I think it was made for educational purposes. Are you going to show footage of it? If so, where? Yes, the people have spoken. Fresh Zone? I'm not sure. Another quotes the game's text. Yes, they are really playing it. That line is weird. I'm playing and recording the game right now. I'm really weirded out, to be honest. So, a disclaimer, I'm going to count this as non-canon because there's some later information that contradicts this, but it's more so that this is just the first reference to Animal Investigator. The actual AI Builds YouTube channel was created on October 26th of 2018. Its description reads, "Re-uploads of Animal Investigator process." Let's go into the first video uploaded by the channel. The first video was uploaded on November 29th of 2019, a little more than a year after the channel's creation date. The description reads, "Grass, roads, mountains, add house next." The video starts with some selection options, initially asking if the player is male or female, for which they select male, and how old they are, with only 21 or 10 being available. The player selects 21. Then the next few options fly by quickly as the player becomes impatient with the selection screen. Those options are enable access to webcam and microphone, yes, enable access to computer files, yes, enable voice recognition, yes, and are you satisfied with your answers, yes, before finally booting up to the start screen of the game. This feels pretty reminiscent of blindly signing away your rights in terms of service agreements when downloading software. One infamous example being GameStation's Immortal Soul Clause, an April Fool's prank that granted the UK store rights to their customers' souls, which around 7,500 people agreed to before it was revealed. Anyway, back to the game. We're greeted by a cheery looking title screen and our narrator introduces himself. So this is just to prove to you that I have not given up on developing this game. I've just been a little out of inspiration lately, you know. But I thought I would show you the progress I made. So rather than the premise of this being finding this game, the player reveals that they're the one developing the game, and they're recording footage as a way to hold themselves accountable despite their lack of inspiration. Now I do actually have a character select screen. It's nothing that special. I probably have to... I don't really like the music. Yeah, this is what the game looks like right now. It's nothing that special. Just mainly just kind of rocks and grass so far. It's been a very slow process, but I think by next week I'll probably have something more substantial. So this first video sets up the context of the series pretty well. Let's see what happens in the next build. The next build was uploaded the same day as the previous one. Despite that, there seems to be a time skip between when these videos were recorded and when they were uploaded. The video's description reads, House, Papers, Characters, Up Next, Night Mode. This video goes straight into the gameplay without much embellishment. Hey guys, so I'm back. This is my third build. I know I said I was gonna have something like 3 weeks ago, but I got a little sidetracked. But I have quite a bit more added since that last update. For example, I have this really big fence here So I'll be pointing out little hidden details as we progress through the video. For now, I just want to point out what looks like a tunnel in the background behind the fence, probably the one for the selection screen at the start of Build 02. Okay, continuing on. Our narrator has added some small details to the world. It's not very good, but, you know, I'll probably fix it later. There's a little sign here for newcomers. Yeah. Thought it was cute. Are you fucking serious? Oh my god. Yeah, this happened last time. I don't know how to fix that yet. And these signs. One poster reads, Find and capture Dr. Ant. He is fast, but if you hold the sprint button, you can catch him. The next sign reads, Collect golden magnifying glasses to unlock better items. The dev goes to read the last sign, but some sort of texture issue renders it unreadable. As it is rotated, a red orb appears on the page. We can actually read the text on this page right before it comes into view. Beware Mr. I, they roam at night. I'm gonna try to get more stuff done by next week. I know I failed to deliver last time, but you know, I'm really trying. We see an ant-like figure, presumably Dr. Ant, but the dev seems to just gloss over him. So we have a little more to analyze in this build. The dev gives a pessimistic overview of the game so far. He's already behind schedule by 3 weeks and seems very harsh on himself, focusing on his failure to deliver and ending by saying he's really trying. The next video was uploaded with the description Night Mode, plus questions and answers, gonna add trees next, on the same day as the other videos. But again, it's implied these videos are archives of a previous upload where they were separated by some time gap. We immediately cut into a Q&A about the game. Why does this game look so much, or at least seem so much like Animal Police, which is a much older game that I did not make? And the reason why is because I was a huge fan of that back when I was a kid, and I just wanted to at least borrow some of the ideas from it to put into mine because I'm such a big fan of it. But yeah, that's basically how I can answer that one. Some people actually accuse me of stealing from it, and I'm just like, no, I'm not really stealing anything. I mean, I borrowed a few of the concepts and maybe a few of like the designs, but other than that, it's basically a completely new game. Aside from that, the other question was regarding why didn't I show the ant character. To answer that question is I already said why I wasn't going to show that because it doesn't exist yet. Yeah, that's not a thing that exists yet. I don't think I'll be able to finish that whole ant character by next week. That just seems a little ridiculous, but I guess that's Mr. I. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to say. Also, this is the nighttime
mode, which I did not show in the previous one. I forgot that I had that.
Okay, 2 new pieces of info to digest here. Firstly, Animal Investigator is being accused of stealing from an older game known as Animal Police, and the dev claims Dr. Ant hasn't been added to the game yet, despite us clearly seeing him in the previous build. Considering that, the Mr. I character we see also likely wasn't something this game dev had intended to add yet. So is someone altering the game without the dev knowing? And what is this Animal Police game? Well, considering this series was inspired by Petscop, calling this game an Animal Police ripoff is sort of a meta acknowledgement of criticism that the series is stealing from Petscop's format and character designs. But what if Animal Police actually existed? Well, it does. A user called Wooden Hornets posted the channel to the Petscop subreddit with the post title, Petscop-inspired series it seems, Xbox game titled Animal Police. The Animal Police channel was created on March 17th, 2014. Considering this predates Petscop, this was likely a different channel that was then later renamed to Animal Police 8886. Its first video is simply titled Animal Police. This came out in July 14th of 2017. Petscop started on March 12th of 2017, and this series comes out during the first sizable gap in Petscop's release schedule, making it one of the earliest parodies of Petscop. Impressive. So let's see this mysterious Animal Police game for ourselves. Huh. Was the Xbox intro always like that?
Hey guys, so I just found this game in my basement, and I'm just gonna play through it a bit. So yeah, let's get right into this game. All right. So, I ended up getting the, thing to work. I'm going to start playing the game more.
Well, this sure is a game.
I can't read, so I'm just gonna, whatever. I think it broke.
So the game crashes. Let's jump ahead to when Nicholas, our player, resumes the game.
This is, pretty interesting, so, yeah. See ya.
Alright, I think covering this first video gives you a good sense of the rest of Animal Police. There's not much more to expand on it. It mostly was designed as just a quick parody of Petscop and some of the tropes in it. Something noteworthy, though, is that Animal Police 4 introduces Mr. I, the same character we've seen a hint of in AI builds. In Animal Police, Mr. I seems to be a parody of the tool in Petscop and how it communicates with Paul. Not much more in the video will be of use to us in analyzing Animal Investigator, so let's get back on track. This build comes out 2 days later on December 1st of 2019, though we're about to see that it's been much longer between dev updates. The video begins midway through a sentence as we see a familiar magnifying glass loading screen.
I've been gone for so long, guys. I've just been really busy. Sorry if I'm not all there right now. I'm just very sleep deprived.
It seems like the dev has been working on the game without sleep since we saw him last, and more odd features have been added to the game.
What? How did that get here? That's strange. I didn't make you yet.
The dev confirms this is a golden magnifying glass he intended to add and reacts in a stunned daze.
It's pretty funny. I didn't put it there yet.
The dev continues to showcase the game in their sleep-deprived stupor, but something else strange happens.
That's weird. How come I can touch this tree? That's oh, wait, can I do it? No, I can't do it on that one. Guess it's only this tree. That's pretty funny. What happens if I... No, I don't know. Do I want to click on it? Yeah, I want to click on it. Let's click on it. And then... What?
The The game seemingly added a cutscene to itself. A few things to note from this clearly unusual scene. The clouds in the sky change color from a dark green to white. The dev assumes what's happening is a dream or hallucination induced by his sleep-deprived state, and so reacts in shocked amusement at the fever dream-esque sequence. Either the dev's sleep deprivation gets to them, or something in the game is able to influence him, as we hear him fall as Dr. Ant rushes toward the screen.
It's a funny feel.
So things are getting weirder. Let's continue. 2 days later, on December 3rd of 2019, we get Build 05. The video picks up with a view of the scene we just witnessed, except this time, nothing unusual is happening.
What? That's funny. That's funny.
Now, this might not make sense yet in how we're able to obtain the footage from the previous build, but this implies that the odd cutscenes from Build 04 were the result of a hallucination that only the dev could see. The footage here is what actually happens. So let's see where this goes.
Funny feel.
Suddenly, something takes control of the mouse and keyboard, and we load into a cutscene. The voice is hard to make out, so here's it with subtitles. So that was Mr. I. For some reason, this character is demanding that the dev keep working on the game and is in the house right now. The dev wakes up and he seems rightfully a bit disoriented.
What time is it? God.
Eventually, he notices the updated build and the video cuts off. So what to make of that? The previous changes were likely hallucinations, but there's still something wrong with the game. Is it projecting subliminal messaging to the dev, causing him to update the game in his sleep? Is Mr. I some type of alter ego, an external influence? It's too early to start making any of these kinds of guesses, so let's keep watching. Another day, another build. Once again, it starts off midway through a recording. We learn a few pieces of information as the character walks.
Sorry, I'm distracted. I've been walking out here for like 2 hours. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was him doing this, because if you don't know, my brother Josh, kind of a dick. Yeah, like about last month, he actually made his own fake animal police game just to mock me. Did this whole impression of me and all that bullshit. Yeah, it's probably on YouTube somewhere, I don't know. I didn't find it very funny. I found it kind of hurtful. And he, like, put in stuff in it, though, that's, like, more related to me. Like, Mr. I, for example, which was something I'm going to include in this one, but take it more seriously. Because, if you don't know, Mr. I's, I don't think I actually explained this now. Mr. I's, like a childhood character that I came up with, basically, like the sort of imaginary friend that I had.
So that provides context for the Animal Police YouTube series we saw. It's a prank by his brother Josh intended to mock Animal Investigator's development and parodies a potentially real Animal Police series that the dev took inspiration from. Interestingly, he mentions that it's a parody his brother made about a month ago. So that means the events we're seeing are dated to sometime in August of 2017. But why is this imaginary friend in his game if he hasn't added him yet? Is this really just Josh's doing? The dev continues walking by the fence and notices something. A house with a large butterfly perched on top. A butterfly rests on the ground.
Nice job, Josh. Fucking fucked up the textures. Dumbass. Yeah. No textures on this building either, you dumbass. Pretty good music though, not gonna lie. What's in here? What the fuck?
It's a baby in a crib, a mobile of butterflies circling above him. Dark shadows spread limber lines over the walls, highlighted by a hypnotic purple nightlight. For whatever reason, this imagery seems to disturb the dev, but he still tries to save face.
Why would you add that? You trying to scare me, is that it? Not really working, not really scared. It's a pretty lazy attempt at scaring me, to be honest.
As he leaves, barely visible in the fog of the edge of the map is a giant baby. This seems to seriously freak the dev out as he quickly sprints in the opposite direction before the video ends. The next build begins with the dev, Nicholas, a name we'll later see confirmed but has also been used up to this point, so it's a safe bet, coming clean about the weird happenings of the game so far.
Thought I should clear something up, because, this has been haunting me for a while now. I don't think Josh added that stuff that you saw. I don't know how it got there. When I was playing the game, I didn't mention it, but I saw a butterfly fly by through my window, and I thought it was just a coincidence, but I'm starting to, like, going back and looking back at what you guys have been talking about. I don't think it was a coincidence. I remember when I was a baby, my mom, she got me a butterfly mobile. I guess it kind of just snuck its way into that building. I feel like I can't stop playing for some reason. Like, I'm just drawn to it and I can't stop. I want you guys to be here for me while I do this, because I need to show people what's going on.
So, now the series has shifted from development updates to an exploration of this game that seems to be mysteriously shifting and adding content based around the developer's subconscious. We cut to footage of the dev exploring another house, where he finds a computer and magnifying glass, both locked behind needing a gold key. Without the magnifying glass, none of the world's objects, including the posters, are interactable. The dev begins searching through the mountains to find said key, and stumbles across some lights in the distance.
Oh god. What the fuck is that? Is that... Oh shit.
It's Mr. I. Hiding in the cracks of the mountain, the dev stumbles across a face.
What is that? Oh my god! Oh Jesus. What the fuck?
Sneaking past Mr. I's eerie spotlight, the dev finds the gold key perched atop a building. First exploring inside the house, there's a sketchy note lying on the ground. The text is hard to make out, but I've made a guess as to what it says. "Go away" is underlined by an image of what must be Mr. I, and there's some bullet points below the drawing. Talks in whispers, brings up personal matters, family, can see me. I can't make out the text on the top. If you have any ideas as to what it means, feel free to let me know in the comments. Nicholas is thoroughly unsettled by this.
Wait a minute. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god.
But he still needs to escape with the key. Climbing atop a lamppost, he makes a deft escape away from Mr. I. Back in the house, he's able to obtain the magnifying glass and then use the computer. He's presented with some games to explore. Choosing Animal Investigation, we're taken to a sort of parody of the channel Nightmare Masterclass, voiced by the actual Nightmare Masterclass. So shout out for the great cameo. Check out his AI Build podcast interview afterwards. Back to the game, Nightmare Seminars video seems to stress all the same points in criticism Nicholas has been receiving, which understandably seems to take its toll.
There's no polite way to put this. It's completely derivative of the critically acclaimed video game Animal Police. In fact, there seems to be a ubiquitous sentiment amongst players and critics alike that Animal Investigator is a cheap ripoff of Animal Police. And that's a sentiment I share as well. I mean, it has all of the same elements. the golden key, the magnifying glass, and even the fence. It's all there, folks. And, well, here's the situation. You know when you accidentally purchase the generic version of the cereal you like, and it just doesn't taste quite as good? That's basically what Animal Investigator is. See, it only makes sense that when a masterful game like Animal Police comes out, a myriad of cheap imitators looking to make a quick buck quickly follow.
These fucking people, I swear to God.
Why can't you people just fucking leave me alone?
The 07 builds are sort of a package deal, so let's talk about them together. A series of videos opening with the title card Mr. I Presents. These are clearly not Nicholas's doing. They're being manifested by Mr. I, the entity in the game, the one from Nicholas's childhood. Wake up, sleepyhead, memories, and dreams. Throughout all these videos, we see this 3D representation of Nicholas's bedroom, with Mr. I outside. Mr. I continuously uses forms of emotional manipulation, trying to get Nicholas to let him in, switching from praise to self-pity to belittling to anger. In Wake Up, Sleepyhead, Mr. I pleads with Nicholas to let him in. In Memories, Mr. I shows Nicholas a series of his childhood drawings that Mr. I kept.
This was the first drawing I ever got to see you make. I watched over you as you did it, and I was so proud of you. You're such a talented person. I wish you could just let your creativity fly once again. This one you call Mountain Face. I don't know the story behind it, but it's very nice. And this one means a lot to me. It's the first drawing you ever made of me. I wish you would open the door. And this is the one that reminded you of your mother. The beautiful butterfly. The one that dangled above you and kept you safe as you slept. I did do a great job showing you this one. But, I mean, can you blame me? The butterfly went by so fast, I couldn't make out the details. I'm sorry that I ruined it for you.
So it looks like at least many of these changes made to the game are coming from Mr. I. We also see that the face in the mountain, aptly named Mountain Face, is another piece from Nicholas's childhood, and we get further reinforcement of the connection between butterflies and Nicholas's mother. Mr. I's seeming kindness is clearly just manipulation, and the tone changes quickly.
I wish I could be better. I know I haven't been a good friend. And I know that I hurt you many times. But that does not give you the fucking right to kick me out after how long I've been with you. So you better open the fucking door and let me in. Now.
The last one, Dreams, is maybe one of the most compelling pieces of web series media I've ever watched. Mr. I, in a ditch effort to get Nicholas to open the door, begins manifesting Nicholas's dreams into the game in real time.
So why don't we just show the audience what you're dreaming about?
It's so strange to watch. Inside the game, we're able to hear what Nicholas is saying from within the dream. At the same time, we can hear Nicholas's voice from the real world mumbling in his sleep.
Oh.
Nicholas,
The voice on the phone tells Nicholas that his mother is coming home and to open the door for her, successfully tricking Nicholas into letting Mr. I in. While this could be interpreted as literally opening the door for some real version of Mr. I think it's more so figurative. Mr. I has been shut out of Nicholas's mind, and by tricking him into opening his mind to the childhood thoughts of his mother, he's opened the door to his past, his childhood, where Mr. I has been relegated to, only able to act in a limited fashion in his subconscious. Well, now Mr. I is out. This time, Nicholas speaks from a far-off landscape, the only thing visible being green ground and blue-tinted fog. Nicholas tries to introduce the build, but chokes up. Working on this has taken so much out of him, and he's incredibly unhappy. And he's deleted almost everything from the game. The more he put himself into the game, the more of his own vision people wanted from him, the worse he felt. I'll play some clips from this, but I think it's best viewed uncut in the original video. It's very intense.
I'm so fucking done with this just nonsense. I don't think you guys understand how much this takes out of me. How am I expected to make a fucking game if I can barely, just barely get out of bed each day? How the fuck can I make a game? Why did I think I could make a game? Especially with all you fuckers telling me over and over that I'm not adding anything to the table. You want to see more of me in the game, More of my vision. I don't have a vision. I don't have a voice. I don't have anything. I don't have fucking anything. I haven't had a vision since I was like a fucking kid. And all that's gone now. If you're wondering where everything is now, I deleted everything, because the more I just added stuff, the more I tried to bring my vision out there, the more I just wanted to kill myself, the more I couldn't, the more depressed I got. I can't fucking do this anymore. And why am I uploading this? Why am I gonna fucking upload this?
Notice how the colors change as his mood does, reinforcing the connection between Nicholas's mind and the game. We hear him reach for a pill bottle, and he presumably takes one, and then we see a door appear. Almost completely unfazed at this point, he enters. A hallway, almost hospital-like in nature, and there's no choice to turn back once entered. It also seems familiar to Nicholas.
Why am I not surprised? Oh, okay. I'm not surprised at all, to be honest.
He enters the door and is met with a room with 2 easels. In the back, emerging from a brick wall, is Mountain Face. Text on the bottom greets the player with, "Welcome to Face Paint." It tells Nicholas to study Mountain Face and press enter when ready. Nicholas examines him for a moment and then moves to the easel. First, a drawing of Mountain Face appears. Then, a green and white pill.
What the fuck? No. No, no, no. What the fuck? What the fuck?
Nicholas isn't sure if he can keep going, but despite that horrific event, he decides to open another door. This door opens to a scene that announces Dr. Ant's tea party. Use the arrow keys to guide yourself through this strange forest. All you need to do is find Dr. Ant so you can enjoy a cup of tea. Good luck, Nicholas. Nicholas navigates the path, however, the scenery darkens as he progresses. This is a dead end. Maybe try a different path this time. And finally, Nicholas is given the option to go back. However, the video ends before we can see him take it. Wow, this was just a really intense performance in this video. You can feel everything Nicholas is going through. We also see some more literal imagery in this build. What might be a hospital corridor and an image of a white and green pill. I'll get more into analyzing this later, but for now, let's finish up watching the builds. We pick up again on the trail, though it's changed a little from the last video. It looks more polished, more refined, but also more sinister. As Nicholas continues, the movement will stop intermittently and text will appear on screen, talking to him.
No.
Nicholas seems to have been playing this game without sleep since we last saw him. You can find ways to feel much better. He reaches a fork in the road. Follow the path that helps you remember. In the distance is a tunnel that looks like a pill bottle with the white and green pills we saw earlier.
What is that? What is that? I can't. What happened?
Zoomed up to the tunnel, we see more text. You've helped paint the bigger picture. I'm starting to see everything. You do have a vision. You do have a voice. You just need to feel good. Feeling good makes you work. Feeling bad makes you hurt. I wish you'd let me in more often. I think we'd have a lot of fun. Away from the bad. Away from the hurt. Let me in, Nicholas. I can't let you face this tunnel head on, but you can try to reverse it. Just learn not to overdo it. Don't end up like he did. Get help. Please. You are strong. We are strong. The text blinks out of existence and is replaced by new text which states, "Press enter to have a tea party." After a period of muffled sobs, he relents to the enter key. A skull hangs ominously by the tree next to the pill bottle as Nicholas moves through the pill bottle the reversed way, and the world distorts into a facsimile of a cheery day. The skull is still present on the other side of the tunnel, only it's less obvious from the other direction. Mr. I appears for a few frames, interrupting the pleasant scene. The video skips ahead to Nicholas on the road during the day. He sounds better.
I don't know. I just suddenly feel very inspired. I feel very, open right now. Oh, guys, I think we're getting close. I think we're getting close. There he is. There's our guy. Hey. Talk to me. Go ahead.
I'm so glad you made it to my tea party. I saved you 1 cup of tea.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think Nicholas is doing okay. It's a little hard to make out exactly what Dr. Ant is saying, but from what I can hear, Dr. Ant is encouraging Nicholas to drink the tea. After that incredibly strange and concerning scene, Nicholas returns to the corridor, and the video ends.
What the fuck?
The next build's description reads, "Hard work pays off. Up next, he will be alone." Nicholas enters the next room in the hallway, revealing a poorly lit living room. The TV casting static tinted illumination onto a dark couch. There are 2 items on a desk, the first of which is a note with a sad face. The text is blurry, but I've made an attempt to decipher it. "My cheeks burn red from silly lies, red like the color of my bloodshot eyes. I long for more, yet long is time. No life is earned by wasting time. I search and search, but to no success, despite ticking every box and passing each test. Yet here I lie in bed with bloodshot eyes, lonely, scared, despite my many tries." Nicholas says that he wrote this recently, and now, like so much of his life, it's mysteriously ended up in the game. The next object is a sort of talking figurine. Nicholas presses X, prompting a few catchphrases, mocking some of the lines he said throughout the series.
funny.
What?
Hey guys, so this is just to prove to you
No.
that I wasn't... Why do I keep opening doors? Why can't you people just freaking leave me alone?
What in the fuck?
Nicholas next settles down onto the couch to watch the namesake of this build, PCP, Perfect Child Programming. It takes the form of an animated children's show, with the most bangin' theme song ever.
I wake up, then I go to bed, I wake up, then I go to bed, I wake up, then I go to bed, wait, there's things that I still haven't said, I wake up and go outside.
Okay, but for real, go watch this, cause the whole song bangs. After this musical section, the show proper begins. Drew creates a drawing and shows it to Tim, but Tim accuses him of failing to be original.
But doesn't it look a little similar to the one that I made?
That's not a problem, right?
Why didn't you just make your own thing, Drew? There's a lot of stuff you could make. You don't have to make it look like my stuff. Talk to me, Drew. Why can't you just make your own stuff? Drew? Drew!
Look, I'm sorry, buddy. I just... You know, it's hard to come up with your own stuff when you're as sad as me all the time.
Drew claims it's because it's hard to be original while constantly being sad, but fortunately, Tim claims there's an easy solution.
Drew? Wait, Tim. That's your name. Tim, what should we do?
We should go see Mountain Face!
The fuck?
You wanna go see Mountain Face? I hear he's really good at helping us feel more creative. Let's go see Mountain Face! That might be fun!
Okay, let's go see Mountain Face. Right now? I mean, it's so early in the morning.
Hey look, it's nighttime! Let's go see Mountain Face!
This whole show is unstable, like a nightmare Nicholas is on the brink of waking up from. In any case, they decide to go see Mountain Face to improve Drew's inspiration. Now, inexplicably at night, Tim, Drew, and Jimmy...
Hey Jimmy, are you having any fun?
I'm okay, Tim, Tom, and Drew. Yeah.
What?
look for Mountain Face, but have a difficult time. The show almost seems like it's losing track of itself at times during this search, and Drew is sort of breaking down because of it.
Where'd you guys go? Tim? Jimmy? Tim? Tim! Tim!
Drew, why are you yelling? We need to find Mountain Face right now!
I'm sorry, I just didn't know where you guys were!
Wow, look at this, Drew. It's a magnifying glass. And a fence. I think they might be connected.
That's my build.
If only we could find the key to this situation, we could find Mountain Face.
You're just making stuff up now. You're just looking at stuff and you're trying to connect it together when it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Follow me, Drew.
What the fuck?
Follow me. I know just where to go.
Suddenly, we switch scenes again. Drew is confused why they're near a mound of dirt with a shovel, but we get a sense of what we're looking at before he does. A grave.
Do you remember Nicholas?
What?
No. Who is he?
Himself. Yeah, he himself. Took too many pills. We buried him here. Didn't give him a gravestone, though. He didn't deserve it. Because he was a coward. I don't want you to end up like he did, Drew. So stay away from pills. Stay away from anything that can hurt you. 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 Please.
What?
Don't end up like he did.
What the fuck?
Don't!
What the fuck?
Don't!
Wow, so there's a lot to break down there. Allegedly, this is Nicholas's grave, but let's assume this is more of a projection of Nicholas's worst fears. The green and white pill makes an appearance again, allegedly the source of his death. Tim's voice shifts at the very end, begging Drew not to end up like he did. Then, Tim becomes replaced with a looming purple Mr. I, and on the last shouted, "Don't," we see a frame of Mountain Face with his mouth agape. Then we cut to credits, and it becomes completely clear. This show is yet again Mr. I's doing.
Thanks for watching. It's so fun to share my work, especially with someone like you. You are special. We are special. I'm here for you always. I am in the house. I love to pick your brain. You should draw more. Those were good times. I love you so much. I got my eye on you. Too obvious? You would have made Dad proud. Just remember to stay safe.
And so Nicholas is finally able to get up now that the TV is off. Distraught, he finally leaves the room. This was an incredible episode, and a lot more blatant in spelling out some of the details of the plot to us, especially in relation to hinting at who Mountain Face is. Now, we still have 2 more build episodes left, but I want to take a little detour to a hidden video next. A hidden video labeled Thanks, uploaded on January 21st of 2020 with the description 1000 I Feel Good, was hidden under the playlist tab of the AI Builds channel. It's a video of Mr. I saying thanks to the viewers for helping the channel reach 1000 subscribers and thanking the various characters in the series. It's a fun little way to hint at the future build and make sense in universe, as Mr. I is revealed to be the one behind these uploads, contrary to Nicholas's intentions. For whatever reason, Mr. I wants this to be viewed, and so the viewers of the AI Builds channel are helping Mr. I succeed in tormenting Nicholas for his own purposes. This build comes out about a month later on Valentine's Day of 2020. A fancy title screen introduces the segment as Introvert Island. Sure enough to the title, Nicholas spawns in on a bridge leading to an island. He hopes that maybe this time he can
Breathe a little.
As he turns around, the bridge disappears and he's stranded on the island. A countdown appears on the screen, and when it reaches 0...
What is it counting down to?
The game has taken Nicholas's voice, for now. Nicholas wanders the island dejectedly for only a moment before we cut ahead in time. A butterfly shadow stretches across the sand, and Nicholas looks up to see it soar above him. He chases after it, but it flies out of reach, leaving him by the side of the beach next to an overturned crib, chasing after a childhood happiness that he's unable to reach. The footage skips ahead again. Nicholas catches sight of a beach chair in the distance and moves to investigate. The stripes of the chair match the color of the pills that he now dreads. He sits down and is now locked in as a boat slowly approaches, crashing into him before disappearing as Nicholas is ejected from the chair. Another time skip. This time, Nicholas hears a voice in the distance and sees a hand sticking out of the water. It's hard to hear exactly what it's saying, but it's begging for Nicholas to help, unable to breathe. Nicholas spams the mouse clicks, but nothing happens. You'll be down here too, but you can stop it. Nicholas backs away in horror, disturbed by the figure's last words. He once again skips ahead in time. Now Nicholas notices a building on the island. It depicts multiple showcases of his drawings, with buttons before each picture. Going to interact with the drawing of what appears to be Dr. Ant first, the button plays back audio of himself. Though it's not him talking, it's like he's talking to himself. Maybe this is Dr. Ant talking, using Nicholas's voice. Maybe it's manifesting through Mr. I, who's stolen Nicholas's voice.
Hey. It's me. You've helped paint the bigger picture. The more I've spent time with you, the more I get it. You can stop blaming yourself. You can stop hating yourself. You can stop all of this and understand that time is limited and you can be better, and this isn't all there is. I do love you. I really do love you. So come back, please.
It's reassuring, similar to the text in Dr. Ant's Tea Party. In the commentary over the next drawing, Mountain Face, Nicholas's voice has gotten deeper.
It was scary when you found out what happened to him. The idea that there was no life in him anymore. You were scared, you were devastated, horrified that you'll never speak to him again. You can't let that be all there is. You can't become that face. You can be better. You can keep working, find new things to appreciate in life. don't let the nightmares you get define you.
This section really seems to confirm what Mountain Face represents. The body of someone Nicholas loved, someone who passed away, and the image of their lifeless being traumatized Nicholas when he was young. Most likely this is Nicholas's father. But Nicholas, over the drawing, tells himself to keep going. Don't let yourself become that face. Don't give up. In the next drawing, his voice is deeper again.
It's really hard to make things when it feels like everything's been done before. I wish I had something to say about anything, but I don't. It aches me. It fucking hurts. I wish I had something to say. I wish I had a voice.
As his voice deepens, as he continues through these messages, his outlook, his depression is worsening. And that line near the end, "I wish I had a voice," makes this whole Introvert Island segment come together. Mr. I is taking away Nicholas's voice, assuming that Nicholas doesn't have one anyway. One last picture.
But then when I'm ready to take my life, I remember that there are people that do care about me, but I never understand why they do. I have nothing, so why do people care about me? Why can't you just let me die? I love you all. I really do.
The last lifesaver this part of Nicholas is hanging on to is his childhood happiness and the good parts of his family life, presumably his mother. This progression gives me the impression that as Nicholas's outlook becomes worse, his voice is deepening because he's becoming the very voice of Mr. I. That we're seeing Mr. I as sort of this manifestation of Nicholas's worst thoughts and feelings. But the video doesn't end here. We still have a bit more to see. We have one more very abrupt cut in the video. Mr. I suddenly confronts Nicholas head on, the landscape distorted by his sickly purple gaze. Nicholas seems to be gasping for air here too. Mr. I launches into a barrage of beratement, claiming the only thing Nicholas has to offer is his suffering, and that Nicholas is nothing without him. But then...
Fuck you! Fuck you! You've done nothing but take from me! Who the fuck are you? I hate you! I fucking hate you!
Nicholas finds his voice again. The game's screen glitches out and frees him from the introvert hellscape. We see the build screen appear, and we can look through the previous versions. Is this from Mr. I's perspective now? Did he exit the game when he lost control of Nicholas? Well, there's one more video to look at on this channel. So we've reached the final video on the AI Builds channel, which comes out a month after Introvert Island on March 30th of 2020. Its description as of now reads, "How long has it been? Arriving soon," perhaps hinting at a finale to come. It's not clear whether there will be more AI builds yet. If you're interested in the story, or just want to rewatch it in full on your own, which I'd highly recommend, please subscribe to the AI Builds channel to keep up to date. With that out of the way, let's get started. We're back at the PC, and in the corner, we see text registering what we're seeing as a part of Build 06. The computer screen comes alive with text. Nicholas is asleep. We've been doing this for you. Feel free to enjoy some of the various activities we've included on his computer. Then we see familiar looking selection menu. Skipping through the menu shows different short scenes representing the different games Nicholas has played, the first of which is Introvert Island, where Mr. I's dialogue once again evokes the feeling of an abusive relationship. Mr. I claims he needs Nicholas and his mind, and yet tries to isolate him and claim that the island is all Nicholas will ever need. The next scene is of Perfect Child programming, which is loud and distressing. Then Dr. Ant's tea party. The dialogue is a bit hard to make out here, but seems to be more of the welcome to my tea party type stuff. Then face paint. The voice is once again hard to make out, but it sounds something like, "How could he do that? You're only 10. This provides some more context on the 10 or 21 selection screen we saw in Build 2. This traumatic event that Nicholas encountered with someone close to him happened when he was only 10 years old. Finally, Follow the Leader is chosen, and we're once again with Nicholas.
I'm just sick of letting him have control, you know? Like, I just need to do stuff on my own.
Nicholas seems to have freed himself from Mr. I, at least temporarily. He comes across a sign in the light of the street lamp. It reads, "Follow the leader." A glitched whining roar begins to sound from the darkness, and the guttural voice of Mr. I yells Nicholas's name. Forced to flee, he stumbles across a blue house. With Mr. I close behind, he slams the door in his face. Now inside, Nicholas has a moment of reprieve, but of course that isn't meant to last. Mr. I angrily screams to be let in. A time skip, and Mr. I continues to plead at the door, apologizing and claiming he doesn't want to hurt Nicholas, and then Mr. I passes a note under the door. We've seen this song and dance before. This time though, the pages are a comic about Nicholas's dad. Page 1 depicts a young Nicholas with the dialogue, "Mom, why is Dad acting weird?" His butterfly-headed mother replies, "He is just trying to feel good." Young Nicholas says, "He keeps yelling," to which his mom responds, "I know." The next page shows a tearful eye and the words, "I'm sorry, stay in room," with an image of a person crouching in the corner. And lastly, the words "stop," with an image of an open door. Nicholas laughs in disbelief at the comic, repeating,
You can't use this against me. This is nothing.
The last page of the comic shows a slamming door, a crying eye, and the text, "Open the door," the R ending in a dragged scrawl that stretches to the bottom of the page. We can see that Mr. I's angry knocking at the door seems to be paralleling Nicholas's memories of his father. And then...
This means nothing.
Nicholas burns the comic. One last cut in the video, and Nicholas cautiously peers out the window, assuming that Mr. I has now left. He approaches the door and escapes. So that's the end, right? Well, I have one last side tangent before we jump into the analysis section. It'll be short, I promise. So, a channel called Film Student Thoughts was posted to the community tab of AI Builds. For now, let's talk about the videos. Each one takes the form of a video essay about a different film, but it quickly becomes clear that these are parodies of the format.
John Merrick, a man who in real life was stomped on by elephants, is portrayed incredibly profoundly well by the actor John Hurt, whose name is probably a reference to how John constantly gets hurt throughout this film due to his ugliness. Well, here's the difference between you and me. I'm a film student, and you're not. So I'm just more in tune with how a movie is made and what metaphors it makes. The first thing I'd like to talk about with The Elephant Man is the way this film plays with shadows. This film is so beautifully lit throughout, and you can really see the menacing use of lighting to really bring out the feeling of fear when the monster appears. Let me show you an example here.
The voice is clearly the same as Nicholas, but at first it's not entirely clear if this is just a separate parody series from Alex, the creator behind AI Builds, or if it's actually related to AI Builds. In the second video, an essay about Her, we can see the essayist projecting his own feelings of loneliness onto the film, digging into his feeling of isolation. Okay, so this part has copyrighted music, so I have to talk over it. Essentially, this is just the video essayist going on about how he has never been able to date anybody, and that he just stays in on his computer and nobody at his college campus notices him, and other confident people are, you know, getting dates, and he just can't improve on himself, and he's having a hard time improving on himself. And he relates to this because to this movie because he's sort of trying hard to connect with people, but he feels distant and alone. And that he makes short films about his like college peers because they don't notice him, and so he's trying to show them that he's noticing them. It's very weird. It's also worth noting this is an April Fool's thing, so it's not 100% canon. This is clearly like, this is joking, but then something strange happens.
If you don't mind, I'd like to take a quick break from the film analysis to show you some drawings that I made when I was a child. This one I called Mr. I. I drew him after feeling like people were watching me judgingly while I was walking to class one day. This one I called Mountain Face, which I didn't put my name on for some reason. I wish I could remember why. This one is Dr. Ant. I named him after my doctor who prescribes my medication. And this one is a beautiful butterfly, which reminds me of my childhood happiness. Interpreting these films feels like looking back on my old drawings. I feel like I'm close to cracking what the purpose was, but my mind won't let me reach the conclusions. And that's what Her is all about. Her continues to take everything away from me. Thanks for watching.
The final video was released in 2021, around a year after our last AI Builds upload. And, well, it's not even really an essay.
Hello everybody! Today I would like to talk about my favorite horror film of all time, Cloverfield. The reason I love Cloverfield so much is the big monster. Big monsters are really scary, and I found the monster really, really scary, and
So, there's Mr. I. It's hard to make out exactly what he's saying, but it amounts to calling out to Nicholas, begging him to open up again, as the image of a baby emerges from the void. And that's all for AI Builds, for now. Alright, so there's a good bit to talk about here. I just want to quickly acknowledge the incredible performance of Nicholas and Mr. I first, though. Just all of it is amazing. This series is a genuinely tense, at times scary and disturbing, beautiful and meaningful piece of art. Now, when it comes to plot, AI Builds also isn't the most straightforward, though it's pretty linear. It isn't exactly clear how Nicholas finds himself in this surreal, nightmarish scenario, so I've come up with a few alternate theories, all originating on the nature of the green and white pill we see throughout the series. These three theories will be called the coma theory, psychosis theory, and dream theory. There's some details that will likely stay the same throughout these theories, so let's revise some basic plot points in the series. Nicholas starts off creating a game and sharing it with an audience. Nicholas has trouble with the game development process, being overly critical of himself and his perceived criticism, and berating himself over his lack of inspiration. Part of this criticism comes from heavily taking inspiration from a series called Animal Police, an in-universe representation of Petscop. As Nicholas goes about planning out the game, his ideas take a life of their own, and becomes hijacked by an entity we will know as Mr. I. The game adds content to itself, often directly reflecting the mental state of Nicholas or regurgitating his childhood memories. Nicholas has a brother named Josh. Josh hurtfully parodies Nicholas's work with the Animal Police YouTube series. While Nicholas first assumes the game's modifications are due to Josh, he quickly learns of Mr. I's presence in the game. We learn of Dr. Ant, a representation for Nicholas's childhood and maybe present-day psychiatrist. Whenever Dr. Ant is present in a scene, Nicholas acts strangely. We then discover the butterfly, a representation for Nicholas's mother and childhood happiness. This implies that Nicholas likely had a good relationship with his mother. It's unclear if his mother is still in the picture though, but she's likely a source of comfort for him throughout the series. The nature of Mr. I isn't always clear. Since my interpretation of him varies throughout the three theories, I'll save talking about him for later. Mountain Face is likely the face of Nicholas's father, witnessing him following an overdose. It is implied by Build 008, Follow the Leader, that his father passed away when Nicholas was only 10 years old, and the event traumatizes him. The green and white pills that appear throughout the series are implied to have something to do with his father's death, either being the cause of his overdose or Nicholas fears that the pills will change his fate to be the same as his father's. Most of the series depicts Mr. I essentially tormenting Nicholas, and Mr. I repeatedly makes efforts to break into areas where Nicholas is attempting to hide. This could be both a literal attempt to gain entry through barriers put in place by Nicholas, or a metaphor to gaining access to Nicholas's mind. Mr. I also frequently exhibits behaviors that mirror those in an abusive familial relationship. By the end of the series, we learn that Nicholas's father seems to express some of the same behaviors, as we see a comic of Nicholas hiding in his room to the sound of his father shouting to open the door. Okay, so before we get into the three different theories that I outlined earlier, I want to do a bit of a disclaimer. Because of the nature of AI Builds and the territory it covers, a proper discussion necessitates talking about mental health and some experiences and conditions that I personally don't experience.
I don't feel like I'm necessarily a person of authority on some of these subjects. The friend who wrote some of these does have a little bit more experience than me in some of these, but most of these are based around interpretations that others have had in relating them to their own experiences. And I just wanted to say I'm trying to be as respectful as possible. And if you have more personal experiences with these sorts of things, I would really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. With that said, let's talk.
So I think the 3 theories I outlined previously diverge depending on what type of medication this pill is, starting with the one I think is most likely, the coma theory. The coma theory assumes that the green pill is an SSRI called fluoxetine, which is prescribed to treat Nicholas's depression. In this reading of the story, overwhelmed by the present, Nicholas unfortunately ends up using his pills as an escape, echoing the actions of his father. However, this attempt fails, and he enters into a limbo between life and death in the form of a coma. This series would then take place in Nicholas's mind as he recovers in a hospital. This interpretation is also enforced by the hospital-like corridors we see in the later half of the series. Hence, the nightmarish scenes present throughout AI builds reflect Nicholas's regret and horror at the immutability of his decision, and his will to change his fate. Mr. I would then be a personification of the trauma from Nicholas's past, which explains why Mr. I mimics abusive behavior reminiscent of his father. Despite Nicholas's desire to be free of him, Mr. I constantly demands entry to that part of his mind. Mr. I also represents the parts of Nicholas that are directly harmful to him. Mr. I is unfairly critical of Nicholas and admonishes his loss of creativity and his limited work output. He appears to want to help Nicholas, but all of Mr. I's attempts at this actively harm Nicholas further. Additionally, Mr. I frequently weaponizes Nicholas's fear of ending up like Mountain Face in order to inspire Nicholas to continue work. However, this constant reminder of that horrific event may only make it harder for Nicholas to find peace. My hope is that in the last build of the series, by escaping Mr. I and seemingly burning the comic in build 08 Follow the Leader, Nicholas is able to, in a way, defeat Mr. I and these thoughts that influence his potentially fatal choice. In an optimistic reading of the series, this would overcome the overly critical and unrelenting thoughts that prevent Nicholas from rejoining the outside world. Ultimately, since the series isn't over yet, we won't know if Nicholas has really won. There's also the possibility that the pill is methylphenidate, a stimulant used to treat ADHD. This would also explain the reason Nicholas was prescribed medication at such a young age, as stimulants are one of the most common classes of drugs prescribed to children. The focus on inspiration and motivation throughout the series may then tie into the symptoms of ADHD. Though lacking these things also overlaps with depression, people with ADHD may develop depression due to the inability to appropriately address their ADHD symptoms. The name Perfect Child Programming and the insistence that Drew should be able to produce work distinct enough from Tim's drawing may also reflect the idea that one's value is only represented through their work output. Additionally, Perfect Child Programming reminds me of the concept of gifted children. Gifted education seeks to accelerate the learning process for children deemed ahead of the curve when it comes to educational prowess, but often grossly underprepares students when their perceived innate giftedness is no longer able to carry them through the pitfalls of procrastination and the non-academic world. Perhaps Nicholas had some type of pressure on him as a child to maintain this gifted status, and was tempted to take more and more of his stimulants, possibly to the point of abusing them. While the dangers of abusing stimulants are not as much immediately dangerous as SSRIs and other antidepressants, there is a risk of developing stimulant psychosis, a condition that can have symptoms similar to schizophrenia. Thus, shortening of Perfect Child Programming to PCP may hint at this type of psychosis, and that Nicholas's world is the result of either a genetic condition that causes him to experience psychosis symptoms, or of stimulant-induced psychosis. While it's possible that Nicholas may have a different condition that causes him to experience psychosis, I couldn't identify an antipsychotic that matched the green and white coloring of the pill, so I'm more inclined to believe that the pill is a stimulant for this theory to work. The abuse of stimulants solely for the purpose of increasing work output isn't new. Philip K. Dick is a famous suspected example of an artist who abused stimulants in order to crank out an incredible number of sci-fi books in a very short turnaround time. Unfortunately, after more than 10 years of abusing stimulants, he began to experience hallucinations and saw signs of religious symbols in odd places. This led him to producing books reflecting some of the concepts of his hallucinations and delusions, most famously writing Valis during this time. Back on topic, if we assume that Nicholas is suffering from psychosis, then the world of AI builds reflects the very real hallucinations he experiences. Mr. I then makes more sense. The feeling of being watched and judged can be a common experience for those who experience psychosis. And the repeated motif of something knocking at a door is another common auditory hallucination. Mr. I would then still reflect a lot of the internal critical thoughts of Nicholas as in the coma theory, but he would additionally reflect a personification of Nicholas's fear of being judged by others, and a reminder of the motivating factor that led him to abuse his prescription. A lot of the traumatic memories represented in AI builds through characters like Mountain Face reflect Nicholas's worst fears, as his psychosis alters his perception of reality. This also means that the ending of AI builds would be left a little more unclear. Lastly, the dream theory. It all starts with a grandfather It assumes that the green and white pill is temazepam, used to treat insomnia. In this theory, Nicholas is plagued by insomnia after the trauma of his childhood and experiences frequent nightmares. Mr. I torments him during these nightmares, and AI builds occurs within these dreams. I mean, we already know Mr. I can project dreams onto the screen, but let's get a step stranger with this theory. What if Mr. I represents some outside force and is using Nicholas's sleeping pill-enriched dreams as a means to take over his mind? Mr. I frequently demands Nicholas to open the door to him, suggesting he's somehow barred entry by Nicholas. If Mr. I is in command of the nightmarish world of AI builds, surely he'd be able to gain whatever he wants from Nicholas. Another possibility is that Mr. I is a rogue tulpa. The modern definition refers to a willfully conjured imaginary friend that operates autonomously. Whether Mr. I is an alien, a supernatural entity, or a tulpa seeking full control of him isn't clear, but Mr. I conjures the worst nightmares conceivable for Nicholas in order to reduce him to a state of non-functioning. In that case, AI builds would be a series of Nicholas facing his worst fears in order to save himself from an otherworldly entity, and by learning to cope with his traumatic past, he may be able to free himself from the torment Mr. I puts him through. But whether Mr. I is an alien or a manifestation of Nicholas's worst fears and thoughts, it's clear that the plot isn't the only important part of this series. I've presented 3 alternate readings of the plot of AI builds, but next I want to get into the symbolism in the series. There's a lot to AI builds beyond just that plot, and it's executed extremely impactfully. Let's start with AI builds' focus on childhood. Throughout the series, we see references to Nicholas's childhood through the motif of the butterfly mobile, imagery of babies, and reminders of the event that happened when Nicholas was 10 years old. The very start of the game presents a screen with only a choice of ages 21 or 10, showcasing the swap in mentality Nicholas suffers due to being haunted by the events of his childhood. There's also scenes where we see Nicholas seemingly regress mentally, like in Build 07 Dreams, where Mr. I weaponizes Nicholas's fond memories of his mother against him. When we see the symbol of the butterfly, its texture is glitched and a potential representation of Nicholas's childhood that is corrupted by his traumatic experiences, or maybe just that the memories are more indistinct than Nicholas desires. Further symbolism in Introvert Island showcases that Nicholas's childhood is out of reach, as Nicholas chases after the shadow of this childhood, only to be left by the beach with an overturned crib. We also see signs that Nicholas fears his childhood, as in 5 Storytime. A glimpse of a giant baby poking from the shadows triggers some deep fear in Nicholas. The very last scene of the series, in Why Cloverfield is My Favorite Film of All Time, also shows a baby floating in darkness, once again calling back to this theme of childhood and possibly rebirth if Nicholas successfully frees himself from the grip of these memories. The green and white pills also play an important symbolic role, and the green and white are often used to inspire dread in Nicholas. Even from the start, we see the clouds above Nicholas look like these green and white pills. Through the series, these clouds loom above him, a constant source of dread that hangs over his work. A fork in the road also marks Nicholas's decision. Does he choose to go through the tunnel or take a different path? Traversing the tunnel, the world also changes, turning from immensely depressive to oddly colorful, though the looming imagery of the skull still hangs from a nearby branch. In PCP, the pills are also explicitly explained, perhaps too explicitly to the audience, hence the too obvious message at the end of the show. My favorite example of the pill motif is the chair scene in Introvert Island. Nicholas makes the decision to sit on the pill-colored chair, and once he's aware of the danger of his choice, he's powerless to undo it. The Dopplering echo of the ship's horn indicates a clear threat, and despite his rapidly more panicked slamming of the space key, he can't move out of the way. I've never seen anything capture the dreadful regret of this situation so masterfully. This ties into the next theme I want to cover in the series, the dread of not being able to undo one's actions. Nicholas's fear of mimicking his father's decision is palpable throughout every mention of Mountain Face in the series, and through the incredible performance of horror in Nicholas's character. Mr. I is also a terrific source of horror, a component of Nicholas that takes a life of its own. Mr. I also may reflect some horror at repeating the past, maybe even the fear of retaining some of the traits of Nicholas's own father, as Mr. I is an internal representation of that part of Nicholas. Thus, escaping Mr. I may also represent escaping a cycle of abuse. Mr. I, also literally being an eye, symbolizes judgment and criticism. Mr. I is implied to be the internal representation of Nicholas's fear of judgment and the cruel motivating source of his work ethic, mirroring the behavior of his father and his worst critics all at once. Contrary to what one may believe, this type of cruel critic is often counterproductive to inspiring oneself, hence why Mr. I's attempts to motivate Nicholas fail. Considering the series itself starts off as a type of parody of Petscop, it is very aware that some may perceive it as just a Petscop-alike, and that makes sense as a topic to cover in this series. Keep in mind, criticism comparing other found footage gaming web series to Petscop occurred fairly frequently, and even the original Reddit post of the earlier conception of Animal Investigator had some somewhat harsh responses, or at least looking down on it. Don't make this another obscure Petscop series, and another critiquing the image for having a non-realistic ESRB rating. The pressure on creation Mr. I and Nicholas stress may also reflect an unhealthy trend in our culture, that one's value is the work or output they create, and one might constantly need to create to be deemed worthwhile. This causes Nicholas to spiral deeper into darker thoughts, and AI builds may be an attempt to highlight that creation and originality isn't the end-all when it comes to making art. If Nicholas stressed less about creating something entirely original quickly from the start, he may have been able to enjoy the creative process. It makes me think of the tortured artist trope. In PCP, Mountain Face, an emblem of something incredibly traumatic in Nicholas's life, is supposed to help them be more creative. Earlier in the series, Nicholas talks about the pressure to put his own vision into the work, and the more he did that, the worse he felt. It's like he felt pressure to put his trauma into his art to make it original, instead of just copying a game he liked, turning a creative pursuit that he may have enjoyed into a rehashing of trauma that he may not be ready to deal with. Nicholas's self-critique and constant output also is satirized by Nicholas's continual apologies for taking too long between builds, despite most of the videos having between a day and a month gap between each other. A pretty impressive track record. Piggybacking off the idea of this trauma and self-critique, there's an interesting duality playing out in the form of Mr. I and Dr. Ant. If Mr. I is a manifestation of Nicholas's bad thoughts, manipulating him, echoing fears of his criticism and originality, it says something interesting that Mr. I is also afraid of the pills, warning him not to end up like his dad and to stay away from pills. So even though that being afraid of pills is an understandable fear to have with that sort of trauma, Mr. I is also very purposefully keeping away from any other forms of help, isolating him on Introvert Island and really anything that would make him feel better. So Mr. I is like a manifestation of his trauma and the worst self-critique thoughts that Nicholas has. At times comforting and familiar, but mostly harmful. And Dr. Ant is sort of the antithesis to that. Antithesis? Giving positive feedback and really trying to help Nicholas. At first glance, it feels like Dr. Ant would be the good to Mr. I's evil, but it's also really clear that the series is not taking that at face value, as Nicholas becomes very loopy and not himself when he's around Dr. Ant. Dr. Ant complicates things because he's not the clear-cut good guy in the situation, but I think that's sort of the point. Dr. Ant seems to mean well, but it's sort of showing that neither option is really going to fix things, that neither way really is solving his problems, which is why he's having such a difficult time. Mr. I makes him miserable and hate himself and give in to his worst fears, but at least he's still lucid and himself, and it's familiar. Dr. Ant makes him feel good, but he's completely out of it. And also the line, "feeling good makes you work," does elicit some of the points we discussed earlier about making your value being work and productivity. And then there's Mountain Face. This concept is one of the most impactful parts for me. It's so exactly what it is, if you know what I mean. It functions in so many ways. The use of a mountain highlighting how monumental this event was for Nicholas and how largely and unmovingly it stays in his head. On the other side, Mountain Face functions as a really powerful way to get across the feeling of seeing someone you love recently after they've passed. It's them, it's their face, but they're just not alive anymore. An inanimate object just as alive as a rock. That dichotomy is so strange to process, especially as a child, and this Mountain Face design really captures it in such a striking way. He's not a spooky demon face, it's just a man's face. A relatively banal expression staring ceaselessly at nothing, emerging from a mountain. Something else unique to AI builds is the impressive extent to which it captures the feeling of nightmares. The sound design encompasses the suffocating feeling of trying to wake up from a nightmare, and its use of split-second or lingering frames of disturbing imagery mirrors the exact kinds of scenes I'd see in my own nightmares. Dreams and nightmarish themes are also present in the structure of the episodes, where Nicholas' thoughts readily influence AI Build's world in much the same way as dreams. AI Builds additionally captures some of the feelings of dread and horror in an incredible way, allowing the audience to also feel these powerful feelings in a medium that is better able to express them. If there's a point to art, which is debatable for sure, I think AI Builds gets really close to realizing it. Being able to project a feeling or an idea from one person's mind to another as closely as possible. We can never actually know what it's like in another person's head, but AI Builds comes as close as I think you can to letting us know what someone with similar struggles as Nicholas might feel. That concludes the collection of thoughts I have about AI Builds, but there's still a question I have to answer. Are series like Sheriff Domestic and AI Builds Petscop ripoffs? Well, hopefully I'd think the answer to that question is a strong no, but they still do start off as parodies of Petscop. So what makes them original and another series a ripoff? To answer this, I want to explore this concept of originality when it comes to art. Alright, so there's a good amount of this script left, and I was trying to figure out the best way to go through it. And I figured the best way is to have the script on my phone, and I'll just sit here and wax to you guys. So what is art? Does it need to have a purpose? What if, just for fun, someone decided to make art void of meaning? Well, in the early 1910s, a group decided to do just that. The Dada movement. Faced with the indescribable horror of World War I, people started to ask themselves about what the point of it all even was. In a world where something as globally traumatic as World War could even happen, what was the point of creating? Did there need to be a point? Could anything be art? The term anti-art, a precursor to Dadaism, was a term that categorized the attitudes of the time to reject the bounded definitions of art by making art, but not in the way that the world had seen before. One of the most famous examples of this anti-art sort of sentiment, and one of the founding minds of Dadaism, was Marcel Duchamp, a French artist most famous for Fountain, or as you may know it, the piece of artwork that's literally just a urinal. Fountain was a part of Duchamp's Ready-Made series. They were various objects that Duchamp would then exhibit as art. In an interview with Francis Roberts from 1968, Duchamp defined his ready-mades as a work of art without any artist to make it. When I created the ready-mades, it was not at all intended to have an explanation. The iconoclastic part of it was much more important. Roberts then asks an interesting question. Do you feel that the act of creating a ready-made is an act of art? To which Duchamp replies, I wouldn't say so, no. The fact that they are regarded with the same reverence as an object of art probably means I've failed to solve the problem of trying to do entirely away with art. So, interestingly, Duchamp sought out to create something that wasn't art, and yet by even having that purpose, he ended up making art. So if the making process doesn't define the art, then does the intent define it? But then if we were to examine someone's art without knowing the author's intent, does that then make it not art anymore? What about art that no one sees? I don't think I'm qualified to settle on a concrete definition, and I don't think anybody is. But art exists as this kind of paradox. If you set about trying to create something without an artistic message, you end up accidentally making a piece of art about not making art. The conceptual challenge of mapping out the boundaries of what is and isn't art ends up bending those boundaries. Trying to make a piece of media without an artistic message is like trying to run off the surface of a Mobius strip. Do parodies or minimal effort reproductions of existing pieces of art count? Another one of Duchamp's attempts at an art-defying ready-made was called LHOOQ, which was a taped-together postcard that featured the Mona Lisa with a mustache, and an added inscription, which when read aloud sounded similar to the phrase that roughly translates to, "She has a hot ass." You could argue that this is a unique idea, but he wasn't the first to parody the Mona Lisa. So if
being the first to an idea isn't necessary to making art, we can't exactly claim that the reason Fountain is notable is because it was the first to do it. In fact, in an exhibit presented in the MoMA from November 9th of 2014 to February 25th of 2015, took this a step further by directly reproducing the artwork of a variety of different artists and presenting them. Personally, I love this. One of the main ways artists have historically improved their skill is by meticulously trying to recreate and study classic pieces of art, repetitively copying classical pieces of work to improve their skill. Okay, but getting back on the track of web horror, is it any surprise then that when a big series like Petscop comes out, a bunch of people create stuff inspired by that work? They may sometimes miss their intended execution or be a bit rough around the edges initially, but I believe that through continuously practicing and seeing what works and fails when referencing another piece of media, it'll only help the creator improve. So I've talked about how even creating a replica or trying to make something that has no meaning can still come out to be an interesting piece of art, but surely there's some examples of stuff that it was poorly done, right? Are we able to tell the difference between good and bad art, or is there even such a thing? Let me introduce you to a documentary called Exit Through the Petscop, Exit Through the Gift Shop. So first, I'm going to recommend that you watch Exit Through the Gift Shop yourself if you care about spoilers. It is an incredible ride. Okay, here's your chance. You still here? Okay, let's get into this. Exit Through the Gift Shop was a documentary released in 2010, originally intended to document the early history of some of the most famous street artists in the world. However, the point of the documentary quickly falls off the rails. We think initially that this is just going to be documenting Banksy's early career, but the cameraman, Terry Guetta, quickly steals the show. Terry Guetta amasses a huge amount of footage of people creating some of the most well-known pieces of street art and just the day-to-day lives of these incredibly famous street artists. But when it comes time to actually edit it all together, Terry is unable to make anything coherent, not only because of the mass amount of useless footage, but also because he lacks any real editing and filmmaking skills. Banksy and crew end up needing to put this whole thing together themselves and re-edit it to sort of more be about Terry. But in order to get access to Terry's footage, Banksy tells Terry to essentially go out and make his own art and put on his own art show. Banksy has no idea the insane ramifications of that request. This kickstarts Terry's art career. Terry mortgages his business in order to fund his incredibly ambitious first show. That's not to say that Terry would have been, completely on loose ground if this had failed. Him and his family have huge amounts of real estate investments all over LA. Terry adopts the name Mr. Brainwash, and he dives deep into renting out a huge former CBS studio in LA for Life is Beautiful, his first show in 2008. This show included almost 200 paintings, a 20-foot robot made out of TVs, a giant spray paint can sculpture, and many more impressive pieces. But there were a few things not quite right about this attraction. One, Mr. Brainwash had no idea how to run an exhibit of this size, and Banksy and crew ended up having to step in to save him. Secondly, Mr. Brainwash didn't really create this art, at least depending on how you define it. Mr. Brainwash relied on a team of artists and sculptors to create his impressive collection of pieces. He'd flip through books of existing famous pieces of artwork, write down notes on how to alter them, and then assign the tasks to his workshop of elves, to quote Banksy in the documentary. But wait, I already talked about how Duchamp did essentially the same thing, taking a ready-made piece of art and then slightly modifying it and showcasing it as a unique piece of art. Why is it different with Mr. Brainwash? Well, YouTuber opinion alert. In my view, Mr. Brainwash's art feels altered by its intent, exclusively to make money and gain fame. Duchamp intended to poke fun at the art world scene directly. Mr. Brainwash, maybe he's doing the same thing in a clever way, in a way that makes him a lot of money, but I'm conflicted about the mass production of art in the way that he does it, that he workshops from these unnamed and less handsomely paid other artists. His works are fairly inoffensive aside from poking fun at pop culture, and just feel empty. That's not to say that they aren't art and you can't derive a larger meaning from them, but just knowing that they were made to sit in a collection and appreciate value means that they just as easily could have been stock or real estate for all that they were intended. Now, feel free to share your thoughts about this whole thing in the comments. I honestly think that the character of Mr. Brainwash and Terry Guetta is more interesting than any piece of art that he's ever created. In some ways, it reminds me a lot of what the discussion around AI art and NFT art has been. He feels kind of like a trendsetter in that way. People argue whether they are or aren't art, and personally I draw back from any definition that tries to limit what art can be, but you can definitely appreciate art less when it seems to have been made exclusively for appreciating value and fame, with little interesting intent or artistic process behind it. Okay, but what does any of this have to do with Petscop? Let's go back to the start. There will never be another Petscop. I understand that the phrase is essentially just trying to get across the impact that it had and the community around it, but I think the statement is true in another way. Even if someone created an exact replica of Petscop, it wouldn't be the same. Oh, here's my cat. This is Gus. Patreon saw him first. Just saying. Even if it was a one-to-one recreation of Petscop, it wouldn't be the same thing, even if it would be slightly derivative and uninteresting. My claim is that the term "there will never be another Petscop" is simultaneously true and false. More of the same ends up being boring, and another Petscop would be too imitative to be engaging. Stealing ideas from wildly different sources, twisting them around in some way, and repacking them in a new form is what makes creating media interesting. Even starting with the same concept as another series can result in huge divergences in where they go if combined with other themes and execution, as was the case for both Sheriff Domestic and AI builds. If we tweak the phrase to be more specific about aspects of Petscop, there will never be another series as weird as Petscop, Sheriff Domestic captures a lot of that spirit. There will never be another series that portrays dread like Petscop. I think AI Build succeeds there. There will never be another series with the slow burn storytelling like Petscop. In my personal opinion, Teeny Toys, a series I've also covered previously, does a pretty good job at that too. The execution of a new heavily inspired series may not always be the best, but the more someone works at creating something, the more opportunities they have to improve. It took a bit for some of these series inspired by Petscop to appear, and for a time there may have been some series that were not executed that well. But originality, in my view, just comes from knowing the right ways to repurpose and execute ideas in novel combinations. And that takes time to master. If you feel like the genre is getting stale, read some new books or watch new films or a completely unrelated form of media from what you're creating. Take note of the ideas you enjoy and maybe you can find a new way to iterate off of them. Now I think we're finally ready to talk about analog horror and the Mandela Catalog. The Mandela Catalog takes a lot of inspiration from previous analog horror series like Local 58 and the Walton Files. It uses images that have circulated around the internet for years, and the normal thing, spooky thing setup had been done in FNAF VHS for quite a while. But it also introduces some ideas that hadn't been explored in quite the same way, and a lot of the audience that were initially introduced to the Mandela Catalog Volume 1 hadn't seen those viral spooky images. They were just in different corners of the internet. So their effect was novel and at times terrifying to that new audience. Some critics of the series complained that this trend of using spooky faces as a source of horror was overdone, and lamented the state of analog horror at the time. But given room to grow and improve, the Mandela Catalog has changed in these really interesting ways. It now blends elements of digital horror, mixes CGI with real film, and has this very unique, high contrast style. If the community had just written it off right from the start like some people had wanted, we might not have given it a chance to see what it could become, and demonstrate what it is fully capable of. And I want to make myself clear, I'm not saying you can't criticize pieces of media. Constructive criticism can be a really important part of a creator's journey to improvement. But I want to stress the importance of encouraging new web series creators, even if the work they first put out might be a bit rough around the edges. I've seen promising series end midway through because criticism was coming in a much harsher way than it needed to be. People immediately comparing random amateur pieces to the giants of the subgenre, as if every single one of these right out the gate needs to be of the same quality in order to be worth something. So let's build each other up. Poking fun in really rude and hurtful ways only makes us miss out on what could be really promising new series. Speaking of that theme of improvement, let's look at analog horror in the wake of the Mandela Catalog. One major complaint at the time was that the Mandela Catalog was the final nail in the coffin for analog horror. By refining a characteristic slideshow-like, easy-to-replicate style, many new creators were able to create their own series with minimal effort. There were a lot of series that seemed similar to the Mandela Catalog, but with an altered plot and altered spooky faces. So, is analog horror dead? No, I don't think so. I think a lot of new creators were just experimenting with the medium, getting better at writing, filming, and creating a series of their own. While it may have initially seemed to spawn a lot of series that may not have held up to the spotlight as strongly as other analog horror works, I think it's created a resurgence of some cool web series. The best of which I think take inspiration from new sources and mix it with the analog horror format. Vintage H's whole channel, especially The Children Under the House, which I talked about before, Angel Hair, which is this really well animated thing that I also talked about in the Children Under the House video. Vita Carnis, a series that utilizes puppetry and practical effects to make its living meat creatures come to life. And there's a lot more that I still haven't got around to watching yet. I also wanted to highlight that people who start off making parodies or derivative works, in quotes, don't always stay doing the same thing. Alex, the creator of AI Builds, didn't just make AI Builds. I've talked about Summon House in my last digital horror video, and there's a series that Alex has done that I gotta talk about at some point called The Journey. All of this stuff I'll have some link to somewhere in the description or comments or something like that, and you should definitely check out The Journey. It's insane. So I've talked a lot about my thoughts on originality when it comes to analog horror and found footage, but how do you realistically achieve it? Well, I have dabbled in this before, but I think the better thing to do is take some people who have a bit more experience with this and ask them.
Hi everybody, I'm Saria.
My name is Alex Kister.
Hi, I'm Parson Hex.
Hi, I'm Adam Butcher.
Hey yo, it's Alex, the creator of AI Builds, Summon House, The Journey, and other weird, cool stuff that I hope you enjoy.
I'm an acrobat, a multimedia artist, and the person behind the web series Diminish. Diminish is what brings me here as a guest.
I made the series The Mandela Catalog, as well as my miniseries Mystifying Oracle.
I'm a writer and director, mostly of short films, sort of web series type things. I'm best known for Internet Story, The Game That Time Forgot, and What Happened to Crow 64.
I'm a musician, and I'm the creator of Illusion Lock. I was inspired by online web series and projects such as Petscop, and I wanted to make something that used a similar medium of storytelling, but I wanted to emphasize different themes. So I tried combining elements from other media I enjoy to create something that didn't rely on just one source of inspiration.
I took inspiration for AI Builds from a lot of things. Tonally, I took a lot of inspiration from Alan Resnick. Things like This House Has People in It, unedited footage of a bear, Alan Tutorial, things like that. Definitely aesthetically is what I grabbed a lot of inspiration from.
Most of my inspiration for the Mandela Catalog kind of came from other analog horrors that were popular around mid-2021. Mostly The Walton Files, Gemini Home Entertainment, and Local 58, which the inspirations were pretty obvious by just looking at my earlier episodes, but as I kind of went along, I started to develop my own style by kind of building on those tropes in a way. In terms of content, I was kind of inspired in general kind of by internet horror as a whole, usually by implementing more like creepiness rather than scariness in a way. Things like shadows lurking in a dark corner rather than jump scares. I was always a really big fan of that, and that's kind of remained a staple throughout the entire series. I don't think I've ever included like an actual jump scare in a way.
Really quick, I'll just mention some of the core, tangible works that inspired Diminish pretty directly. Probably the biggest one, as most people like to point out, is indeed Petscop. Though you could say Catastrophe Crow was a more direct inspiration because I first started brainstorming the concept of Diminish immediately after watching the amazing What Happened to Crow 64 meta video essay on Adam Butcher's channel.
Internet Story was mostly inspired by just me spending a lot of time on the internet and kind of thinking that there wasn't enough stories being told about this thing we were on all the time. You know, this was sort of 2009, 2010. There weren't that many stories about the internet being sort of told in this way. Aside from that, I would say my other big inspiration was this short film called Guy 101, which I'd seen at a film festival back when I used to go to film festivals. I guess it just shows that if you actually go to film festivals rather than relying on the YouTube algorithm, you might actually see some stuff that's genuinely inspiring and interesting and a bit different.
For my other series, Mystifying Oracle, I kind of took a more of a nostalgic approach to it in a personal way, by kind of utilizing the early 2000s YouTube ghost sighting format in a way like that was pretty dated, but using that intentionally to kind of using that kind of like natural creepiness to it, which I feel like other series aren't really doing as much, but are kind of starting to sprout now, which I really like, which is more effective for people my age who grew up on YouTube around that time compared to people who are maybe a little bit older, who are more affected by the nostalgia of VHS tapes with analog horror.
There were a lot of works that gradually inspired me to give it a try. The NES Godzilla creepypasta, various other haunted game pastas from the early 2010s, more recent ones like AI builds. Illusion Lock was a big one, as well as a series whose creator once distanced from, so I won't mention the series, but I'll shout out their current art later. All in all, Petscop was the series that, years ago, played a major role in shifting what I thought was possible in storytelling and broadened my horizons regarding how a story can be told. It was such a ridiculously unique and effective way to intimately reach people, and, in a sense, that genreic groundwork really felt so accessible to pour myself and Teddy into so we could share that intimacy with the world too.
PCP was definitely directly inspired by Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, and was intentionally meant to seem kind of almost derivative of that style. Oh, and Petscop.
How do you make an original web series? Tough.
I think the definition of original varies from person to person, but for me, in order for something to be original regardless of outside inspiration, it needs to be grounded in something personal, some kind of lived experience that resonates deeply with you, either in an emotional or spiritual or relatable type of way.
What I would interpret as original is something that I haven't seen before, like felt before, or maybe like an idea or topic that hasn't been built upon as much as it could have for a while now.
My advice to new creators would be understand the difference between inspiration and derivation. Some of my favorite films as of recent have inescapable parallels to what they take inspiration from, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Midsommar, and other amazing films, in my opinion, amazing films like that. The idea that the only way of being original is making sure every single aspect of your work is fully an original thought, to me is absurd, since practically everything comes from something else. And with that logic, almost all stories throughout history wouldn't be able to exist since they probably most likely borrowed from other works as well. Even Petscop itself is inspired heavily from works like David Lynch, pre-existing web series, and probably a whole lot of other stuff that we might not even know.
Inspiration doesn't exist in a vacuum, and generally new ideas are passed down from old ideas that people have already had before.
I would say that if there's anyone out there who wants to maybe pursue like a web series or something, especially in the internet horror landscape today, it doesn't even have to be horror, and that kind of plays into originality. You don't have to do what other people are doing. You can use ideas that you like I've taken so many ideas from other analog horror series that I liked, and I didn't steal them, but I built upon them in my own way and utilized it in my story. So you can use ideas from other series, but implement your own ideas into it. Put a twist on something that people are familiar with and throw them off course a little bit. Don't be afraid to do that.
If you're not actively biting off one specific thing, don't worry too much about your project being like something else. Just stay true to the story you need to tell, and if you need to tell it in a way that's kind of rough or imperfect at first, that's fine. We all have to start somewhere. My advice for creators is to remember that you're doing it for you. It's going to be a personal journey, and that isn't to say, like, ignore all criticism and don't take feedback, but it is to say don't lose yourself in other people's expectations.
Don't be afraid to kind of do what you want. Things don't have to make sense. You don't have to conform to any ideas or formulas or anything like that. Just do what you want to and what you think is powerful to you. And other people, I can almost guarantee, will feel the same way.
But I would say the main way of making something truly original is by not being afraid to just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Just be full-on creative, be full-on crazy with your art. You know, like AI Builds is fully from the ground up, completely based around improvising, you know? Like every line of dialogue is improvised. Most of the visuals I just sort of had a dream about, and I woke up and I put it into Cinema 4D and rendered out some idea from it and told a story around it, you know? I think the best way to just make anything original is just don't be afraid to just go insane with it. And yeah, that's basically what I would say.
I think making web series is tough in general because it doesn't have a very clear audience at the moment. You're kind of relying on the algorithm to get audiences to your web series, and you're, I guess, hoping that they come in at episode 1 and then you keep them on the journey to episode 2, 3, and 4, or however your web series is structured. In order to break into the algorithm, you usually need some kind of hook. You know, a lot of people use the kind of creepypasta kind of vibe, which I think can be incredibly effective. Like, you think you're watching one thing and it actually turns out to be something else. It's that kind of thing that can get you on Reddit and just to get people clicking on a thumbnail and stuff like that. In a way, your web series is slightly dictated by just like how can you even get people to click onto your thing. And I think that can cause problems with originality. I think originality is hard. I think probably it's trying to come up with other ways to stand out, and other ways to get people to your thing and excited about your thing. And that often does involve thinking again about like the audience being on the internet and like where are they before they've seen your video. Have they been on Reddit? Have they been checking the weather? Have they been looking up the pronunciation of a word? That's how the pronunciation book web series was created, which I'm a big fan of, probably one of the few big fans of it. So yeah, I think originality is hard in and of itself, but the thing you have to be wary of is you could do something incredibly original, incredibly cool, but people just might not see it. All I can give as advice to new creators is, you know, try and come up with things that people haven't done before, try and do them well, and don't try and copy, just try and be yourself, as cheesy as that sounds.
Sagan asked me to discuss what I think, in my opinion, makes a web series original, and for my advice regarding how to make an original web series. And immediately, as I thought about addressing that, I think I ran into an impasse regarding how society defines originality. I think the concept of originality isn't something that has a reliable shape as a tool in an argument. Creations can be more based on existing works, more inspired by existing works, and even more imitative of existing works than other creations are. However, I do think that it's incredibly easy to talk about this concept and concepts like it in a misguided way. Try thinking of it like this. That art that you want to make, that thing that you're really passionate about, the heartbeat of your creation, imagine it's the color blue. But imagine that lately it's become increasingly popular rhetoric that the color blue is so overused, so overrated, and it's killing originality in art. No one knows how to make anything anymore without filling it all with blue, blue, blue. What's so special about blue? It's so boring. It's above us every day. Come up with something original. It's perpetuating this era of lazy, visionless media. And suddenly, it feels like no one takes the art that you want to make seriously anymore. It just feels like the audience that you might have had is evaporating, and all that's left is rageful and disgusted people waiting to pounce on you for what you love. They will. If they're angry about people liking the color blue, they'll let you know. But if what you desperately want to make is full of the color blue, you have to keep loving blue. You have to make it anyway. And God, I know that's easier said than done. Believe me, I know. When you feel the desolation of sharing your heart with a world that doesn't want it, it's so hard not to say, what's the point? But you asked that already. When you decided that you want to make something. And the answer was another question. What if I made that thing that I just have to make? It's that nagging feeling burning inside you that made you want to pour your love and effort into making something in the first place. You want to make something. That's it. That's the bottom line. If your dream project is all about the color blue, that's what you should make. And people who despise that, they can scream, they can flail, they can throw rocks, they can try to stop you. But what can they really do? You're the one holding the pen. It's your world. If you want to make it blue, you can make it blue. As for the people who hate it, all the grand majority of them can do is kiss your ass. If a work of art is clearly and conspicuously inspired by another, or it closely adheres to extremely common archetypal formulas, then yeah, I guess you could say it's unoriginal. But you can't measure originality with some barometer, and you especially can't directly measure how that affects every other aspect of the work. Most of all, you can never fathom how it affects every person who has ever interacted with it. It just makes each person feel how they feel. And as the creator, all that matters in the end is how it makes you feel. When impactful things like Petscop spark a huge wave of works that use it as a conceptual basis, people will always be mad and sound the unoriginality alarm, despite the fact that that work was cribbing off of something that was made 10 years ago, which was cribbing off of something that was made 12 years ago, which was cribbing off of something that was made 40 years ago. It's just, there's just no use. There's so little point in trying to avoid these things. We're a human, and so are all the other humans who interact with us, the things we say, the things we do, and the things that we create. And now, billions of people constantly have access to you, and they can say anything they want about anything they see anytime they want. In the end, when it comes to how originality is defined, you cannot truly be original. You will not be allowed. So, Sagan asked me what I think makes a web series original, and my advice for making an original web series. I don't approach it that way. In truth, the thing that stands out to me most when I interact with art is how much I can see the heart of the person making it. How genuine it is. Dead ass, I think when something is dripping with the honesty of the creator, that is about as original as you can possibly get. I think the only time you should ever try to make something original for originality's sake is if the thought of that makes you get up in the morning. Because if making something original for originality's sake is what you really, really want to do in your heart and soul, then that means you will make something that is you, and it will be really cool. But if you're trying to make something original for originality's sake and it's not for you, it probably won't work. Because what you're trying to achieve does not exist. There's no concrete definition, no one will agree about it, and it may not get around to convincing any of them. Because when you make something, the most important person to convince is yourself. Make it for you. Don't try too hard to be original. Don't be a thief. Be you. And it will be original. It's like someone I love likes to say, being cool is overrated. Be warm instead. Okay, well, Sagan said I could do shoutouts, so I might as well start with said loved one and friends. Kjorteo, Kjorteo, the Woodlings. A collection of people who embody being warm and being yourself about as emphatically and extensively as you could possibly be. They inspire me every day. Feel free to benefit from those vibes on their Twitch channel if you'd like. Also, earlier on, I mentioned a previous unfiction creator who inspires me. They go by Crushes Bones, and they also exemplify originality through doing the exact art they want to do and being themselves to the utmost. They make a lot of music. It's gnarly, it's unique, it's expressive, it's entrancing, it's Crushes Bones, and it may be for you. Also, if you're around unfiction spheres like this one, you may already know about Illusion Lock and its creator, Parson Hex. Illusion Lock is another vibrant example of everything I've been talking about, being able to see somebody's mind and spirit through making exactly what they want to make. And there's a lot of it. So if it's your thing, you've got a feast of really lush and colorful unfiction videos waiting for you. And yeah, when Sagan mentioned shoutouts, he probably might have actually meant me shouting out my own spaces, and in case that's true, sure, Diminish is a thing, and it's not done yet, despite what channel activity would suggest, I promise. I also stream games and speedruns and art stuff constantly on Twitch, and I have a few YouTubes of various types of content. I've got a Twitter, so on, Seriasong and Seriasong accessories. I tried to keep it as short as possible, but I'm me. I know I'm really intense and a lot. This time I won't apologize. Deal with it. Thanks so much for having me, Sagan. You're doing great stuff. Keep killing it. Best wishes, everyone. Dream on, everybody. Peace.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hopefully you found some of what I've said, or more accurately, my friend / guest writer has said, interesting. And you should really check out all the series that I've mentioned. Honestly, I am so tired right now. I have so much editing still to do. But thank you to everyone who agreed to get interviewed for that end segment. Definitely check all the stuff that they shouted out and everything that they've worked on. Bye.